Well, howdy, hey, everybody. It's been a long time since I've fired up Restream to do this. We'll see where it goes. Got a lot to cover and kind of impromptu stream. Going to be streaming with Fresh Faces New Ideas, who was the first Twitch streamer to engage with me. Big fan of his. He's been he's a policy wonk. He's a strong lefty. He's not just well versed on culture war takes. I mean, this guy is like really deep in policy lore, kind of like IRI. So big fan of his. He and I often troll right wingers on Twitter, which is always fun. So we're going to be covering kind of a midterms recap and then the dual investigations, which launched last week. One from the House Republican Party into Hunter Biden. And then the second one, which came a day later, in which Attorney General Garland announced a special prosecutor into President Trump. In particular, the January 6th attempted insurrection, and then the classified documents which were found in Mar-a-Lago. So those are sure to keep things really interesting ahead of the 2024 presidential race. And then at the very end, we will review Destiny's debate with Nuance Bro and DebateCon down in Plano, Texas. So I'm going to bring Fresh Faces in here. Hey, what's up, buddy? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, perfect. It's a little stuttery, but could just be on my end. Let's see here. Actually, real quick, I'm going to open this door. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Shit. Rachel's having connection issues. Is it my stream? That's not me.
Be sure to follow Fresh on Twitter. The link is below. And then also on Twitch. I'll probably pop these up pretty frequently.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. I have been very busy, so I haven't been streaming as much as I wanted to. Comes with the territory of working the jobs and the classes that I'm taking. So we'll figure it out. I do plan to come back soon. I'm moving to an area where I'll have better internet connection. That is why the link is different, and I'll figure it out as things go.
So you did move, or
and
you're
then
in the process of moving?
I'm in the process of moving.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I mean, like for I just moved, just as a sidebar, I just moved to a new state, new city. Unfortunately, I don't have fiber internet like I did at my house before I sold it in my previous city and state. So there are some, especially with upload speeds where I live, it's not quite what I'm used to, which sucks, but knock on wood, it's been fairly reliable. So between your classes and go ahead, sorry.
No, because I can tell the audio and the visuals are a little laggy.
Yeah, a little bit. And we'll see where it goes when it finally goes to. I know it's like simul streaming right now, but we'll see. This is the first time I've used Restream in a year, so it's the first time I've used it in the new place, the new apartment. So we'll see where it goes. It may just be absolute shit, but we'll find out one way or another. Before we get started, just with all the stuff that going on in the move, work, classes, have you been able to follow? Like, were you able to follow the midterm, progression pretty religiously, or not really?
Oh yeah, I was able to follow it. I have to say, starting the night off with Florida was not ideal. It was certainly for somebody who was hoping for a solid outcome for the Democrats. Having all the Florida news roll in at like 7:30 was was not the best way to have that start.
Yeah, I think we all expected Florida would stay red. I didn't expect Val Demings to lose to Marco Rubio, who, in my opinion, is both just a weak man and a relatively weak candidate. Even though he has the incumbency advantage, I just have a hard time imagining people respect him even in his own party. But to see the gap be what it was between Demings and Rubio, that was kind of painful to watch. And then I think, if I remember correctly, Florida basically wiped out any statewide Democrat like office. You know, I don't think that there's like in the executive branch, if I remember correctly, Florida's executive branch, there's not a Democrat in it. And the Florida gerrymandered map, I think it cost us like, was it four seats, 2 or 4 seats in Florida, if that's right?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, certainly having Charlie Crist as the governor nominee was not ideal. I certainly think that probably hurt Val Demings. And then, I mean, there is good news. So, yeah, that's a nice boost to exist.
Yeah, I was looking here. So, like the legislative background of Florida's map is like it's a very sorted. Let's see here. I'll pull it up. The Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was heavily criticized last spring when he pushed Republican lawmakers to adopt congressional maps that were much more friendly to the GOP. Republican lawmakers were initially reluctant to go along with the governor, and GOP legislative leaders even pushed rank and file members for siding with, or punished rank and file members for siding with DeSantis, which I didn't know that. That's relatively rare, I think, among Republicans to have some sort of like sense of fair play. But Republicans in Florida nationally are now praising the governor for strong arming his own party to approve his congressional maps, which netted Florida Republicans. That's what, 4 additional congressional seats on election day and essentially helped the GOP win the tiny House majority.
Can we talk about Florida just in the sense of like DeSantis is, for any Republican, DeSantis is the only person who won. All of the Trump candidates, like the major Trump candidates, except for J.D. Vance, but nobody gives a shit about J.D. Vance, lost. The biggest one was Kari Lake. Kari Lake losing sets DeSantis up, because if it came down to like an actual governor that the MAGA base would rally around, it would not be Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis has the charisma of a carrot. Kari Lake can actually talk to people. I mean, obviously they'd have to get over their misogynistic issues and to fall behind a woman, but maybe Trump would make her VP, and then they could accept her. But like him being the only one who kind of did well, him and Lee Zeldin is the big win for him.
Well, it's interesting you say that because Kari Lake actually at times, I mean, number one, a couple of your points. Number one, she's certainly an effective communicator, an effective speaker. I mean, she was a former news anchor, so she did that professionally, right? And she definitely brings like Trump's sensibility to her political campaign, right? She's clearly a performer first and foremost. She has no real political convictions of her own. I mean, President Obama even remarked how in 2016, or I think it was 2016, she interviewed him when she was a news anchor, and she was very different, right? And then, of course, she had, I think it was during COVID, she had this like weird, meltdown, publicly like resigned on camera, and then she has just been full bore on the MAGA train ever since. She's an attractive older woman, she's got the filters on her camera, so like she's really leaning into that performative angle. So yeah, she's a really good speaker. But it's interesting about the misogyny angle, because I'm pretty sure she's leaning into it too. I'm pretty sure she's like given the affectation of a misogynist and leaning into like conservative tropes about women, because I think she vacuumed. Like she literally pulled out a vacuum cleaner and vacuumed Trump's carpet.
Yeah, she vacuumed. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yep.
That just goes to show how ridiculous
that picture. And it was like, I think it was Benny Johnson who tweeted this out. It was like, yeah, this is what a true public servant is. You know, she said she wanted to be the one to prep it for the president. Like,
yeah, absolutely no self-respect whatsoever. Now, my understanding is she's not conceded, and she's actually in the process of filing a lawsuit for a recount. Is that correct?
I have no idea. I
Got
assume she's not going down quietly. Which let's also mention that every single other one of them went down quietly, because you have to remember. I mean, you don't have to remember. This is relatively interesting news to most people. Just amount that a recount is ever overturned was 200. So anything beyond that is most likely not going to change the outcome. There's never been a recount that has flipped more than 200 votes, which is why Adam Finch in Colorado, who lost to Lauren Boebert by like 500 votes, said, look, like, I understand the math. You know, we came up short. I'm not going to waste all your money in doing this. I think there's an automatic recounted set simply because of how close the margin was anyway, but it's unlikely to change the outcome. So
yeah, he formally conceded, but yeah, that the margin triggered that recount. But he's well aware that it's unlikely. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's a waste of time statistically speaking. But kudos to him for not triggering it himself. It's just, it was fiat, and for, you know, having the integrity to concede the race.
Yeah, the thing that most likely is going to happen with Kari Lake is they're going to see a lot of stuff coming out of Maricopa, because that's the one that they're spreading their hopes on. The fact that, like, so I had a hard time finding out what exactly happened, but I know what they're telling their friends, like what the Charlie Kirk, and they're saying that, like, this is voter suppression because, like, all of the machines in Maricopa County just didn't work for Republicans, and they wouldn't let Republicans vote. Is essentially their argument. Or like 46% of them didn't work. They're just throwing out numbers and stuff that just don't make sense. Like all the Maricopa, like again, Maricopa, like every time an election based in Arizona, it's fucking Maricopa. That's where the cyber ninjas were. Look, it's unlikely to turn the tide, whatever they're doing, because I think she lost by a couple thousand votes. Again, we said it. Anything over 200 is not going to happen. So hopefully they waste more of their lunatics' money. And
she leads Lake, as a matter of fact, she leads Lake by nearly 17,000 votes. As of Friday, Hobbs leads Lake by 16,780 votes, a gap that would not trigger a recount. So it's not even just a few thousand, you know. She said here, she did lawyer up. She said, for 2 years, I've been sounding the alarm about our broken election system here in Arizona. And this past week has confirmed everything we've been saying. Lake said, when we called on Katie Hobbs to recuse herself over a year ago, they ridiculed us. Turns out we were right. Now, obviously, she's appealing to the fact that, you know, Katie Hobbs is, you know, Arizona's Secretary of State, and so is technically, you know, the one presiding over elections. But the processes and like the operational decisions are made on a county by county basis. So Hobbs has no direct impact on, you know, like she's not changing election laws or meddling with things on an operational level, county by county. So, and also furthermore, we all know that if the situation were flipped and it were, you know, a Democrat challenger to a Republican incumbent as Secretary of State, you know that they would not recuse themselves. Like if it were Kari Lake as the Arizona State Secretary of State running for governor, she would not recuse herself. So the double standard is.
Wait, there's actually a example of this very recently in 2018.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, this is what happened in Georgia. Brian.
That's true.
He was the Secretary of State running for governor in Georgia. Except what happened was we know that he was actually purging the rolls for people who could vote. Like we know that they were going out of their way to like try to tilt things. So it's not even that like they wouldn't pretend if this was hypothetical. This actually happened, and they're using the fact that Stacey Abrams pointed this out as an argument to continue to be able to push their election lies.
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot about that. I keep forgetting that was not Kemp was not the incumbent governor at the time. He was just the Secretary of State, and now it's Raffensperger as Georgia's state Secretary of State, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, you're right. And see, and this was the other thing too. Actually, Blue Collar POV says, "Sweet, caught a live stream." Yeah, thanks for joining, man. And let us know if this is the first time in about a year that I'm using Restream. So if anything sounds off, if Fresh sounds off, if I sound off, if the audio that we're gonna play sounds off, just let us know. Hi, Sabrina.
But we were lag. Oh, maybe
say
the
what?
lag isn't that anymore. The lag is caught up, so I don't think it's lagging anymore.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when I go to play YouTube audio. It might break everything. It might just shatter the internet. You know, it's interesting since we're talking about the 2018 thing, just as a sidebar. One of the things that I've been arguing with conservatives on, particularly on TikTok and in other places as well, you know, the false equivalence that's often made on the subject of election denialism, because everyone will refer to one quote from Hillary Clinton in 2019 when she referred to Trump as an illegitimate president. And then, of course, the fact that Stacey Abrams did not formally concede the 2018 governor's race. And to your point, okay, say what you want about whether or not Abrams should have formally conceded because it wasn't going to change the outcome. I'm open to that argument. But
wait, did she actually not formally concede? I thought she did.
She did this race, but she did not in 2018. She did.
Well,
but here's the thing. Here's my point, though. Even if, right, you just illustrated a clear substantive difference between not only what's going on in Arizona now between Kari Lake and Katie Hobbs, but obviously in the 2020 presidential race, because as you say, Kemp was not only the incumbent state secretary of state presiding over the election in Georgia that year, he was actively leveraging that position and the powers associated with it to try to tilt the scales in his favor by purging voter rolls, making it, you know, so that people were not registered and they'd have to go through the process of registering again, which that will always result in a net loss, right? I mean, when people have to go through hoops, you know, to re-register, and they may not even be aware that they were deregistered in the first place, like that is a form of voter suppression, fact. So whatever you want to say about Abrams, she at least had some argument to make to the idea that it was an illegitimate election.
And I think that part of when the Democratic Party in Florida actually does something, I would like to see them looking into, especially people who had been pardoned for felony convictions and had the right to vote in Florida because they have the right to vote. How many of them didn't end up voting because of the stunt Ron DeSantis pulled like a month before the election, where he just randomly decided that these like 20 people couldn't vote, even though they all could, and 0 prosecutions have come from it.
Yeah. I mean, it would definitely, and that's another reason why we need, you know, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed, and hopefully we'll be able to get something like that done if we're able to press our advantage and win the Georgia runoff, so that we can at least sideline one like Kirsten Sinema or Joe Manchin.
Hold on. Like, let's be clear. If there's any legislation that's going to be passed, it's going to pass in the next month or so. Yeah, once the House is sworn in, there will be no legislation passed except
that's
maybe
true,
the omnibus.
because it would have to pass the House again. That's true. That is.
They have to do it in a lame duck. Ideally, right now, the most important thing they do is raise the debt ceiling. That is priority number 1.
Yeah, because people in the Freedom Caucus, you know, have pushed to play chicken with the debt ceiling, as they did in 2021. You know, and you want to talk about, I mean, and I know this conversation can become like a rolling series of tangents. It can just fractal out, but you want to talk about fiscal irresponsibility. You know, the very fact that Republicans would play chicken with Democrats over the debt ceiling is just grossly irresponsible on a level that just it beggars belief. It would destroy our domestic economy. It would cause a global economic catastrophe. And when people talk about, well, you know, we need to, you know, increase revenue streams, cut spending, yada, yada. The fact of the matter is that the Republican Party has raised the debt ceiling. In the past 60 years, Republican administrations have raised the debt ceiling almost twice the number of times that Democratic administrations are. So no matter how you slice this, Republicans have absolutely no basis to justify doing what they're doing. And the fact that they did it in 2021 and they're signaling that they would like to do it again is ridiculous. There's
It's
no
also
depth.
a
There's like
completely ridiculous way to finance your country, and we're like the only ones who do it. We should just raise it to a number that's just inexplicably stupid.
Astronomical. Yeah, 80 gazillion, you know what I mean? Or just get rid of it altogether. I mean, I know there have been pushes for that. And I was looking here just real quick. I highlighted this, getting back to and then we'll end the Kemp Abrams thing. But on a single day in July 2017, which was the election cycle in question, Kemp's office had removed from the rolls 560,000 Georgians who had been flagged because they'd skipped one too many elections. Abrams would later call the purge a use it or lose it scheme. The APM reports investigation last year estimated that nearly 107,000 of the people purged under the policy would have otherwise been eligible to vote, right? So he was definitely rigging the game in his favor as much as he can, and we have no evidence that Katie Hobbs did anything of the sort in Arizona. So
right, the issues in Arizona appear to be some relatively minor
technical issues, weren't they? With voting
Yeah,
machines.
it was like they ran out of ink or something. And they had to turn people away because they can't count votes if the ink isn't like clear. So like they were following law, and I think it was relatively minor. They just made look. Here's the thing. There's certain people, when you see them pushing things, you have to almost immediately assume it's a lie.
Sure.
Anything Jack Posobiec says, anything Cernovich says, Cat Turd, Jesse Kelly, Charlie Kirk at this point, anything about the election is almost assertedly a lie. Anytime Matt Walsh speaks, you got to know who is saying all these things, and that's going to impact what you feel. Or credibility.
Well, as a matter of fact, on that subject, I mean, that's actually, I know this is going to sound like a bizarre sentence, but as a matter of fact, I actually had to come out. I told a friend of mine like this that I actually had to give props a bit to Michael Knowles, of all people, because on the subject of Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter and the fact that Musk is Musk has publicly called himself a free speech absolutist, right? Which is absurd because nobody is. And he is clearly not, right? He has used his power and his influence to punish people for criticizing him in the past. He's revoked Tesla orders from customers who have publicly criticized him. That's how thin-skinned and asymmetrical this man is with respect to free speech. But I actually have to give Knowles a bit of credit here. I think he's repulsive and repugnant, but he came out and said, and he said this before, he supports suppressing speech in what he regards as dangerous speech or bad speech, and supports signal boosting speech he thinks is good, which is actually the conservative version of what Vosh argues and what I agree with, which is censorship is a tool, right? And conservatives will embrace the rhetoric of being free speech absolutists, like Cernovich does, and Sobiak does, and Charlie Kirk certainly does, and all these people. At least Knowles has enough of a modicum of integrity to say, no, I'm not a free speech absolutist. I do believe in suppressing the speech of liberals and leftists to one extent or another, and signal boosting the speech of conservatives. So to your point, it is interesting. Like, he's the one voice in the pack that, at least on one thing, will be quite candid about, how he wants to leverage something like censorship. But to your point about, the fact that when they make an accusation, it's usually often like a tacit admission on their part. One of the things, since we're on the subject of election, integrity, this is something that I've been trying to point out again on TikTok and Twitter, and I really want Democrats, and I'm hoping people like Fetterman and AOC, because they're so media savvy and they're willing to troll the opposition, I hope they make this point. So I'm sure you're familiar with this because I'm sure you've seen the tweets, because I never shut up about it. But, when it comes to voter fraud, the Heritage Foundation, of all places, they track voter malfeasance. And in every listed indictment or conviction of voter fraud, in connection to the 2020 presidential general election, when the culprit's political affiliation is known, he or she turns out to be a Republican or unabashed conservative. If you want to protect elections, if you want to secure election integrity, keep them out of the hands of Republicans. Make sure a Democrat or a leftist is running elections, and you are, statistically speaking, much more likely to have a fair outcome, because it's Republicans that are either voting on dead wives, the ballots of their dead wives, or voting twice or whatnot. These people cannot be trusted. And it's ironic because they have framed the issue as they're the ones who are supportive of election integrity when clearly they're not.
Well, yeah. So let's be clear about when we talk about election integrity. I think since 1970, there's been 1,000 cases of convicted voter fraud. And that's over 1 billion votes we're talking about since 1970. So the argument is not voter fraud doesn't exist. It's voter fraud is a statistical anomaly that it's essentially irrelevant. I believe the number one place for voter fraud in the last election is the Florida. Okay, I do see that. Let's see what I can do to fix it. I have no idea.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, the retirement village in Florida, there were multiple ones out of that building, weren't there? It was a little cabal of them.
There was 4 of them at least. And I want to be clear also, they got the punish they got was one of them had to take a class and pay a $500 fine. When Crystal Mason in Texas, I believe it was, got 5 years probation because she voted when somebody directly lied to her about whether or not she had a status.
She was a minority, wasn't she?
Yes. I don't know if that means.
Yep. Yeah, I see it right now. Yep. Yes, you want perfect example, which is a great segue into how even systemic racism applies to things like voter malfeasance, right? I mean, it's absurd. Do you want to try to test your audio again?
Yeah, I don't. I ended my stream, so I don't. I think that'll probably do it. Mostly because I sometimes it has a problem with crashing, so that might figure.
Oh, you sound better to me because I heard the popping and crackling. I wasn't going to look at.
Yeah, it might be. Sometimes the systems are a little bit too much for my computer.
Yeah. So Sabrina said much better. Man, I hate that you had to end it but
it's all right. I don't stream often enough that it matters right now. So as whenever you post this, I'll just repost it and then
perfect.
It'll be fun.
And Sabrina, Blue Collar, if you guys have a second, I would recommend that if you're on Twitter or anything, you follow Fresh on Twitter. I put the link here. It's right below the screen. And follow him on Twitch as well. He will eventually get back into streaming.
My finals are in the next
working adult with prior obligations, so it'll be a minute, but I'm sorry, what were you saying?
My finals are in the next couple of weeks, so once I'm done with the class, I can start figuring out a better schedule of things, and I'm not just working 7 to 9 every night.
Dude, I mean, it's one of those things where after I moved, so I work from home. That helps quite a bit because I'm able to get daily chores done throughout the day, like laundry and dishes and stuff. Sound alerts.
No, that's just my system catching up to all my stuff.
But yeah, I mean, so that helps, but trying to budget everything is still a bit of a challenge because I still want to have a social life and, go to the gym and stuff like that. But I'm trying to be more diligent. And I was doing video essays and things like that as well. I hadn't streamed in damn near a year, like consistently. But I've been engaging with Destiny a lot more and Luke Beasley. So I'm hoping that something will come of that. But anyway, no, I mean, this, I guess in the end, what did you think of the midterms? Were you surprised? I know I was. I was not expecting
I
the.
look. So there's a couple things. There was a lot of good news. All the like the really dangerous people who were in positions of like Secretary of State or governors, they all lost, which turned out like, so for the people like, oh, the Democrats boosted these people and then they all lost, maybe it was a good strategy. No, it wasn't. It's still not a good strategy, because it's kind of like when you're dealing with uh, a person who has infinite time. You only have to fuck up one time for them to win. Like, to be clear about how fast you lose a democracy, it takes one election. It took one election in Hungary for Orban to fuck the system forever. So you only need to do this one time to lose a couple of places. If they had lost in Arizona, if they had lost in Pennsylvania, if they had lost some of these Secretary of State places, some of these swing states, it wouldn't have mattered that they won in every single other one if they lost in a couple. It worked out this time, but it is not an ideal strategy going forward. Saying that, holy cow, the Democrats did really well. And the most terrifying number for every Republican has to be 27%. That's how many Gen Z. That's how much Gen Z turned out. 27% of Gen Z turned out in this election. That number is going to grow in 24. It's going to grow in 26, and by 28, I believe they're supposed to be the dominant group voting.
Which is interesting, because the conventional wisdom was that they were going to be the least politically engaged, because we see typically a decline in political engagement with each subsequent generation. So that should be the albatross for the Republican Party, because they pissed Gen Z off so much that this generation, which should be the most politically apathetic thus far, period, they actually turned up in these record numbers. Now, I do want to come back real quick to the strategy that you mentioned. Okay, I went back and forth on this. Initially, I was 100% with you, where I was, before the election in particular, I was like, Jesus, this is such a risky strategy. I don't, this is like Russian roulette. You're playing it with the Republic. I don't think it's a good idea. And I didn't think it would work, quite frankly, because I understood the logic of it, which is, okay, these people are nuts, and you would assume a crazy opponent, somebody like Trump, for example. I mean, it's the conventional wisdom about Trump that, President Biden should, if he does run for a second term, he should want to run against Donald Trump instead of Ron DeSantis, because Trump is more impulsive. He's less rational. He's less, clever. And so I understood the logic of, why Democrats were elevating these election denialists and these extremists. But kind of like you, I was thinking, man, you only have to screw up one time in one race, and Republicans may not react the way you expect them to. You expect that would suppress Republican turnout to some extent and enhance Democrat turnout, because, you were hoping that that Republicans would be turned off by the crazies, and Democrats would fear the crazies so much that they would come out and vote against them. But Republicans are, I'm not going to sit here and say that voters in general are particularly rational, but I think in terms of the least rational party, the least rational demographic, they are Republicans, right? Because, and we've had this discussion before, Republican policies don't help Republican voters. They are fodder to protect the uber rich in this country. But anyway, so I'm with you. I was like, oh, this is so risky, but it worked. And I was shocked it worked. And now you have some people like, I listen to a lot of sources, like including like normie sources like Pod Save America, who use the former Obama staffers. And even they said, like, look, people dogging this Democratic strategy. Well, it worked. But I also agree with you that it's like, okay, I don't think you should. I'm worried that this will embolden subsequent Democratic strategists to do this again. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you're ever going to do this, this is a break glass in case of emergency electoral tactic. And my fear is, because it worked in this election, they're going to be inclined to do it again. What do you think?
That's also my fear. I think we got into this is the repudiation we needed in 2020. This was a pretty substantial repudiation of what the bagged Trump wing of the party is. And they said no. Like, the people said no. But it doesn't mean that they're always going to say no. And it doesn't mean they're going to say no everywhere. Because some places are going to win. Like,
J.D. Vance. Well, J.D. Vance is a good example.
Let's be clear. J.D. Vance is, like, the least objectionable of all of them. Like, he's mostly a goofball.
But I mean, talking about somebody who became a full Trump sycophant and who, said that the election was stolen and all that stuff. I mean, like I agree. It was a mass repudiation overall, but there were still some that's not
right. Through. Some of them. So there are a couple people who either were at January 6th or supportive of it who are now in Congress. And also, to the J.D. Vance point, Tim Ryan might have won if he hadn't gone against hadn't publicly repudiated the student debt relief. That might have helped them too. So it's without looking more into the numbers for that particular race, it's hard to put. Like, the point is, some of these people are always going to slip through at some point.
Yeah.
And the damage they can do is incalculable. Marjorie Taylor Greene is essentially the Speaker of the House. She's like, look, to be fair to what the fuck was his name? Was it Marcus Flowers? Was that the guy who ran against her?
Yes.
Good luck, bro. Do not put more money into that race. That seat's staying red, like, forever. Like, they will not lose her unless it's somebody crazier. Like, Lauren Boebert is an area where you could target better than Marjorie Taylor Greene is. But yeah, it worked. It was a break. Do not take the lesson of this is how we do it.
Yeah, don't make it iterative. Don't make it iterative.
It should also be pointed out that you can use this to paint all of the moderate Republican governors. Like use Glenn Youngkin as an example. Glenn Youngkin was a moderate governor who has governed as like a hard right governor with, like, they're all in on the anti-trans stuff and all the other nonsense. It's like he is the one that you can point to. Like, just because you're voting for a moderate Republican, that's what you're doing. Like, that's the type of thing that you can push for. And the other thing is the House held a lot better than I thought it was.
Well, to your point, that's how Marjorie Taylor Greene, unfortunately, is going to become, the de facto speaker, unless Democrats are able to come up with something. I mean, the margins are so slim for McCarthy. I mean, here's the reality. You say what you want about Nancy Pelosi, but her skills as an administrator and an organizer and a caucus chief, they're indisputable. The fact that she was so often able to whip votes from, Justice Dems and also, centrist House Democrats like Tim Ryan and people like that. I mean, she is extremely good at her job. She's the only reason you could make the argument. She's the only reason we really have the ACA, because the conventional wisdom at the time that was going to be, and it was, it cost the Obama administration so much political capital, but she stuck by it. And we wouldn't have an Affordable Care Act today if not for Pelosi, whipping votes in its defense. Kevin McCarthy has not demonstrated a fraction of Pelosi's talent, period. I have no faith, which is good for us, right? It's good that he is not a Republican Pelosi, because he's going to have to balance the disparate needs and wishes of mainstream moderate Republicans with the Freedom Caucus. And even the thing that we're going to talk about, you could easily make the argument that they're already set up for failure in 2024, because the first thing they announced right out the gate, the very next day, was a probe into Hunter Biden. That's not going to play well with the majority of Americans, 100%. Even a lot of independents, I think even a lot of Republicans.
So let's be clear. This outcome was the best possible outcome for the Democrats. We got one seat. I'm pretty sure they're going to win the seat in Georgia. If you're in Georgia, go vote. I think early voting is started. I don't know if it does. But make sure you go vote for because it's a lot for arguing 50-50 than 51-49. And I think there's going to be less enthusiasm, especially for Walker. And can we very briefly, like, I feel bad for Warnock. The dude has run against objectively two of the most unqualified people to ever step foot in the Senate, potentially step foot in the Senate, and both times had to go to a runoff.
Was it Loeffler that he ran against, or was that Ossoff?
Yes, it was Loeffler.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is this. I think it's essentially the same majority that the Democrats had from 20 to 22 within that range.
If it pairs out that way, I mean, there's still 5 congressional races that have yet to be called, but yes, it's looking like it'll be the same margin, just flipped.
So this is the perfect. There is going to be zero policy that is going to happen, especially like because of how they're going to. So they're going to govern where you're it's like whoever's most present in the House at the time is going to have the majority for that day. Like the House is going to be flopping all over the place. You're going to have people get sick. You're going to have people retire. You're going to have people, God forbid, die. There was that one person who died in a crash. Like this minority, it's going to flip pretty often. The other thing is they're not going to get anything substantial done. And this was the thing that should have been like every single time they spoke to a Democrat or Republican, they would go crime or how are you going to solve it? Because the answer is they don't have a policy. That's why they were so mad at Rick Scott, because Rick Scott put out a policy, and his policy was awful. It was banana lands crazy. It was effectively one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And you had Lindsey Graham come out and say, I support a national
abortion ban.
And then you have Marjorie Green, who pushes out legislation. She says, I'm an she has no power or anything. She does this. One of those is it's the trans people. The money they spent directly attacking trans kids during this election?
No idea.
$50 million. You know how many trans kids there are in the country?
A fraction of that. I mean, probably in the thousands at best.
4,200.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, real quick, your audio is popping. Real quick, Fresh. Your audio and video is popping. So hang on 1 second. I'll give him just a second before I invite him back in. Sabrina says Adam Frisch. What did it say? Adam Frisch has already filed to run against Bobo again. Oh, that's good. That's good. Say something now, Fresh.
I don't know. Are we good again?
It's still pretty poppy and laggy. But we'll try to make do.
I'm gonna leave. You back.
Okay. All right. You got the link.
No.
He's gonna pop out and then pop back in, see if it works. Yeah, I know. Telling you, follow him on Twitter though. He's hilarious. He constantly trolls right-wingers on Twitter like Jack Sobiak, Cernovich, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro. He's on Ben Shapiro's ass all the time. It's great. Sabrina, I tried to get Luke in here, but Luke was out hanging out with friends. Uh-oh. You are a low red bar. They suggested maybe like killing the camera on you for a second and just seeing if you could do the audio, but I can't even hear your audio if you're talking. Network connection 0 out of 10. Yeah, I tried to get Luke also to participate, but he was going out having a social life. So I'm like, all right, fair. I'll let you have some friends. Yeah. Now the stuff's crazy with the midterms. I was pretty pleased, all things considered. I miscalled it. I was believing all the conventional wisdom. I mean, every pollster in the world. Simon Rosenberg, who's somebody I follow on Twitter, he's awesome. He was the lone voice, lone contrarian, saying that, you know what, look, this is not going to be a red wave. They're flooding the zone with, right wing pollsters like Trafalgar. They're flooding the zone with bad polls to try to suppress voter turnout. But I'm a cynic. I'm a cynic. You give me a piece of bad news, I'm inclined to believe it. Well, let's see. Share my screen here. Blue Collar says, excellent coverage of these elections. You two are very knowledgeable about the candidates that are ruining. I hope you mean running, but if you mean Republican, yes. Republicans are ruining. Why is this? Interesting. Let's see here. Let's switch. There we go. We can do some trolling on Twitter while we wait for Fresh to come back. He's probably restarting. Lecture Fan, who is a right-wing streamer. He was on Dylan Burns' Hippy Dippy podcast. He's had debates with Destiny and Vosh and others. He's a big Trump sycophant, a talking point machine. He's very good at what he does. Fresh says his internet dies. He died. He hopes he'll be back in a minute. I hope so too, buddy. Let's see, if Trump tweets, it'll be an incredible moment. Will Trump tweet? Let me share a GIF here. Elvis Fan. You at the prospect of your cult leader on social media. I don't even know why they care. Dude has Truth Social, or as he pronounces it, Troth Central. Just go there. If it's so good, if he's so popular, just go on his friggin' social media page. Why does he have to be on Twitter? Why do conservatives care so much that he's on Twitter? If everything Trump does, if he's like Midas, if everything he touches turns to gold, and he's got his own social media platform where he constantly truths, or whatever the verb is, he's on it all day, every day. Why do you care? It'd be like, I'm just trying to think. It's like, oh my God, you're on Facebook, but not MySpace when they were running parallel. I wish you were on MySpace. Who cares? If you have both, just go to the other one. Let's see. Also, I don't know if you all saw this. Let me find it here. Trump Twitter. Let me find this. This is hilarious. He won't go back to Twitter. Let me find this. National Review. This is hilarious. Yeah. Amid the finalization of Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, no. This isn't new. He did something in the past couple of days. Hang on one second. There was a video or something to that effect where he said he would not go back on Twitter, and which makes sense. I mean, he's bankrolling his own social media page. That would be the death of Truth Social if he went back to Twitter, even though I understand why the logic would be of him going back to Twitter, because it's vastly bigger, has more reach than Truth Social, but he may not do it. It'll be interesting to see how Trump responds to this, because it'll be a test of his narcissism against his business savvy. It'd be bad business savvy to go back to Twitter, but his narcissism, where he has to have the biggest audience possible, means he probably should be on Twitter. So it'll be a balancing act. Sabrina says, TYT was all sad news too. I think the most positive I heard was Bo of the Fifth Column. Bo is great. Bo is an optimist. You all should definitely check out Simon Rosenberg, though. He is a former Clinton official. Big fan of his. He did like regular updates and conversations on the election. Um, let me see. Yeah, so Clinton War Room, New Dems, ABC News. He's like a constant contributor, and he is just a data machine. He constantly crunches numbers. He was on Lawrence O'Donnell a couple of days ago. Smart guy, very smart. He's where I get a lot of my information from about like job facts. He was the one who pointed out to me that in the past 35 years, 44 million jobs have been created by the federal government. Like the economy added 44 million jobs in the past 35 years, and 42 million of those jobs were created under Democratic administrations. Sabrina said, I saw that come up recently. He was talking up truth and trashing Twitter. Good. I think that's hilarious too, from just an Elon Musk perspective, because, you know, he's also a narcissist, right? And so this idea that, you know, he bent over backwards to essentially accommodate Trump, get him back on Twitter, which would certainly liven the place up, right? For Trump to basically reject it is hilarious. I saw one tweet that said, that's why you don't propose on the Jumbotron. Propose Jumbotron. That might be where I can find the clip. Fresh might be back. What up, Fresh?
All right, can you hear me?
I can.
Better now?
Much better. Chat, can you all hear Fresh? Speak to me, my boy.
Coming in now. Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm sorry. My internet crashed. I don't know why.
No, it's okay.
All right, good.
We were talking while you were gone about the cynicism that dominated the election commentary, myself included. Like I was convinced that there'd be a red wave. And I'm glad there wasn't, but that was the conventional wisdom. So were you expecting one, I guess?
Yeah,
were you expecting a red wave?
Yes. And like, look, there was, I didn't expect them to keep the House. I certainly didn't expect the way that it turned out, especially in the governorship. So we didn't lose a single governorship, and we had a trifecta in Michigan. We picked up, I believe it was Maine and
Real
Minnesota.
quick on the Michigan thing, that's been the first time in like 50 years, right? Like that's a historic event.
Yeah, like, and the beauty of this is like we actually have like there's candidates who've shown that they can win tough races, and that actually gives us a bench. Like you have the Shapiros, you have the Fettermans, who I really liked anyway. You still have Warnock, who I really like anyway. You have Whitmer, who is fine, whatever. But like, it's better than like if we had gotten shellacked and we had to look forward to like potentially by not running, and we're looking forward to like Pete or Kamala for 24. Like that's awful. But now we're like the party is in a way that it can see itself moving forward progressively, especially since they know the legislation that pushed them toward the that we know will help push us, and it's toward young people. Like think about how much more better we could have done if they had hammered every single Republican on the fact that every single Republican is pro-child poverty because they killed the child tax credit, or they're they hammered in on the effects of them killing Medicaid, the insulin stuff. Like there's so many better messages that they could have run on other than democracy, or like that it's possible to pass these, because at this point it's going to be messaging bills. It's judges and messaging bills that we're going to be able to pass to the Senate. And that's where we can run on. We can run on the climate change stuff. We can run on just repass the fucking child tax credit. Just do it. Like figure out which clown, whether it's Manchin or Cinema, you'll be able to get for it, and pass it with that one.
No, I completely listen. I mean, here's the thing. Going back a little bit about the democracy thing, I've seen some evidence to indicate that played more of a role than I think we initially expected. That
it did. But like You could also have done substantial things like so you wouldn't have people be like, oh, don't focus on democracy, focus on the economy. You can do both.
Right. So that was like the two competing narratives at the time. There were some Democrats who were saying, don't talk about democracy at all. It's just abstract to most American voters. They would gladly, prostrate themselves under an authoritarian if gas prices were 50 cents lower. So just talk about kitchen table ideas. Then there were others that said, no, don't talk about kitchen table ideas or the economy or democracy. Talk about abortion, and the abrogation of rights. And then there was a third faction which said, no, democracy has to be the highest priority. I think to your point, there has to be a scattershot approach because there's not one single talking point that will hit every single voting demographic in the right way. So you have to be agile and you have to, I think, run. Now, I feel like also at the same time, just given the attention span of voters, you can't have too complex of a messaging system, right? Like it can't be a full spectrum antibody system. I feel like you've got to like keep it down to like 2, 3, or 4 points. But I agree with you. There was plenty of room in there for abortion, for democracy, and for, what they call kitchen table issues, the economy. Because here's the reality. This is something we were talking about this while you were restarting your internet. Simon Rosenberg, God love him. And again, I think you should follow him on Twitter if you don't already. He's an ex-Clinton official. He's like really good at crunching data and numbers. He was an outspoken optimist during this election cycle. He said there would not be a red wave. Here's the reasons why.
Was he the one who was tweeting out that we had like a 4.5 million vote firewall?
Something like that. I don't know if I remember.
I remember seeing his tweets like leading up, and I was like, God, I hope this person doesn't make shit up because that's like really comforting.
Yeah, no, and I was, because he was just one voice in, the welter. As much as I like Rosenberg, I was thinking, okay, because I typically defer to expert consensus, which I think is always the most responsible thing to do, just as a general rule. And he, the consensus was against him. He was like the lone dissenting expert. He turned out to be right in a lot of ways, but he has been saying for months, and probably longer still, that Democrats have got to stop ceding the framing territory to Republicans. And he's 100% correct because you mentioned the economy, the child tax credit. Yes, Republicans are pro child poverty. They are pro child starvation. And that, I feel like that is the way to spin it. And maybe it doesn't work. Maybe you and I are both wrong. But fucking try it because we've never tried that approach. And then if we get soundly repudiated because for whatever reason, Democrats aren't allowed to, play negatively or play aggressively, it may very well be possible that the American public simply holds Republicans and Democrats to different standards. That sucks, but we need to test that theory. So let's try it, because others say, well, we can't do that. We can't say that because Manchin also let the child tax credit elapse. And it's like, that's one Democrat to 50 united Republicans. They don't equal each other. As much as Manchin annoys me, he is not as morally reprehensible to 50 united Democrats. And it's not equal. Democrats and Republicans are not equally responsible for the collapse or the expiration of the child tax credit. And it infuriates me when voters, when commentators, when Democratic operatives seem to suggest that false equivalence. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I also want to point out that if we're going to hold Manchin, like we can't do things to Manchin. Manchin is not the person who should be a standard bearer for anything.
Right.
There's so many, like, I want to give you some backstory. I'm currently driving an ambulance. I'm an EVO at a emergency vehicle operator. And the class I'm taking is to be an EMT. And one of the changes that recently happened in being an EMT is the shift away from using EpiPen. So it doesn't mean we don't carry epinephrine. We now use it for vial. They carry little vials with it because the EpiPen, thanks directly due to Joe Manchin's daughter, spiked in prices and it expires. So if you're in a fleet of ambulance, you're working for a voluntary agency where you have 40 ambulance and you have to carry 2 EpiPens that are $1,200 a pop, that's expensive as shit, especially if they expire, versus getting the epinephrine bottles, which is, $3 to $4, and it's significantly cheaper. Like that's we don't need to hold Manchin to like some standard. And let's be clear. In all likelihood, Manchin is going to lose his seat in his next election. West Virginia went like plus 40 to Trump. Like it is not a state that they're going to win a seat.
And he's seen as, and believe it or not, even though we see him as so obstructionist to the Biden agenda, he's seen by Republicans as too accommodating. Like, so to your point, it's such a red state. It was kind of a fluke that he was able to win re-election anyway, and he can't please two masters. Republicans are pissed off at that. I mean, that's the reason. They can say what they want, but that was the reason they obstructed the PACT Act, even though it was previously bipartisan, because they were trying to extract political vengeance against Democrats and against Manchin in particular for pursuing a reconciliation bill, which became the Inflation Reduction Act. Like, he's screwed. He's screwed. Even though we see him coughing up the ball in so many different ways, he's cooperated just enough where he's persona non grata with the Republican Party. Like, they hate his guts now too.
Yeah,
so
I mean, look, there are problems with Manchin, but he, when it comes to judges, he's there. Like,
yes,
he's there on some of the votes that matter.
Yes, 100%. I will not dispute that. And that's why I'd rather have Manchin in West Virginia than a Republican. 100%. When people are like, primary him and let's just lose. No, he's not. He is unprimaryable at this stage in the game with another Democrat. If you manage to primary him, you will not win a general.
I would still primary him. I think you should still pay some type of toll for essentially sabotaging the majority of the Biden administration's policies. I would still primary him. I don't expect them to win. I think the primary is there.
I feel like you should only do that if you have a margin for error. So, like, for example, in our next, like, if we were able to basically negate his vote with a surplus, like 2, 3, or 4, I mean, God forbid we ever get a 60, yeah, I feel like, well, that'll never happen again, especially the way that Republicans are trying to not only gerrymander aggressively, pass restrictive voting laws, and then Moore v. Harper is on the horizon. I don't know if we'll ever get a 60 person Democratic Senate again. But that's the other thing, too, that Manchin frustrates me. If he'd been willing to break the filibuster or to do a filibuster carve out for voting rights legislation, he might have actually saved, or at least increased his probability of winning his seat back, because then the federal government could step in and at least make West Virginia less red by allowing, by maximizing voter turnout. Probably never flip it. But that's the other funny thing. Like, he has helped contribute to his own demise. But
yeah. And to Blue Collar's point, I don't know for Manchin. I don't know who's in West Virginia politics enough. I think Richard Jetta left West Virginia, and I think he would be the best option. But for Sinema, it's Gallego. It's Ruben Gallego. Because he recently came out. So Sinema's done. Like, she will not win another election. The Democrats hate her. The Republicans hate her.
And she is perfectly primariable. She is absolutely.
And on top of that, according to Gallego, she didn't show up in Arizona at all to help anybody. Like, at all. So she's done. And look, I have too many issues with Manchin. I think he shouldn't solely be able to hold up the rest of it. But, on the other side, we end up with 51 seats. One of them we don't have to listen to, and it's probably going to be Sinema, because, to be clear, you can negotiate with Manchin. Like, the fact that we got the CHIPS bill by vote, and then Schumer worked with Manchin to get the fraction of Build Back Better that they did. It's possible to work with Manchin.
And that was a beautiful moment, just FYI, a beautiful moment of Democratic politics that you typically don't see from Democrats, because it actually approached political skullduggery. I mean, it was still all above board, but it was kind of like a ruthless politicking, or at least a flavor of it, a shade of it, that you typically don't see from Democrats, because, again, they did the CHIPS Act. Or no, they did. Yes, so they did the CHIPS Act, yes. And then McConnell threatened to not whip votes for it because he caught wind that they were pursuing a reconciliation bill. Then it looked like Manchin just kind of threw his hands up and said, okay. But then as soon as they passed the CHIPS Act, then they went ahead with I love that. I love that. That needs to be and Republicans were pissed. How dare Democrats?
And then they killed the PACT Act.
And then they lost even more credibility because, Jon Stewart and led, just a complete media blitz against them. And then they folded like a lawn chair on the PACT Act. But that back-to-back-to-back movement right there, we need more of that energy all the time. Republicans were pissed that Democrats briefly played politics like a Republican would. And I love it. I absolutely love it. This idea that Manchin, yeah, I agree with you. Manchin, you can negotiate with. It's hard. It's so hard. And there's some stupid things he'll never budge on, like, again, filibuster carve outs, because he has the stupid idea that Republicans will behave in good faith, even though generally they don't. And he was never able to find success with voting rights legislation. I can get, listen, we got to work. We got to do the work of bipartisanship. I can reach out to my colleagues on the other side. And he was never able to extract votes or concessions from them. So I loved it. I just loved it back and forth. Now, real quick, iCal Rich says Manchin couldn't save himself with voting rights. No way. I don't know if it would be enough to win him re-election in West Virginia, because I think even if you optimize voter turnout, it'll still be a red state. I just find it funny that it seems to me, I mean, Republicans clearly believe this, even if it doesn't necessarily bear out in fact. Republicans are convinced that when you optimize and maximize voter turnout, their chances of winning elections plummet. That certainly looks to be the case, given that usually they don't win a popular vote, certainly in a presidential election.
Although there is a point to bring up here. It does look like they have the popular vote in this election. However, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're tying in 4 seats that were unchallenged.
Right.
So
it was a staggered election. Yeah, you had a staggered election. You had at least 4 races. I thought there were more, but maybe it is 4.
I think it was 21 seats that they ran unopposed, and I think that just because you run an unopposed seat and you get 1 million votes, I mean that's probably an absurd number. Let's say you get 40,000 votes per 21 seat. That's not because the person is 40,000 votes more popular. There was just nobody else, so that flips it as well. I think that would be flipping the numbers as well.
Well, and I don't know what the polling looked like for these, again, those 4 Florida seats that we mentioned earlier, that because of DeSantis's really aggressive gerrymandering that he was able to get, buy-in from state Republicans. We don't know what the turnout was in those districts, because it's entirely possible that, more politically minded voters who recognize that these districts were so gerrymandered, we don't know. We saw generally a pretty decent turnout for Democrats, but that's not necessarily the case in every single district, right? So we just don't know. So I agree that that's one of the things that's been talked about here. Like Tim Pool shared a tweet to that effect. Now he's in favor of the popular vote because now for the first time in God knows how long,
2004.
Yeah. Well, the last presidential election, it was W. Bush's second term.
Probably 2010, they probably had a pretty high turnout because they lost.
Right, but it's so rare. I'm willing to play those odds. Republicans generally are not. They said in front of the Supreme Court last year that was part of the reason why they supported, automatic voter roll purges and things like that. They flat out said, if you maximize voter turnout, we'll never win another election. Donald Trump said that verbatim too. So yeah. It's interesting. Then he says 51 means no tied committees. Yes. So the judges that we mentioned, it will be much easier for Biden to fill judicial vacancies with that one extra vote, because I think in many cases you don't have to bring it to the floor every time. It's much easier to just get it through committee.
And it's probably harder for people like Tom Cotton to put a hold on a judge for 8 months because they told him to shut up one time or something.
Right. So I'm here for it, man. I really am. I'm excited about it.
And I actually do want to talk about his last comment. So the talk about the 1-6 committee. So it's more the second part. So Kevin McCarthy is potentially the Speaker of the House. They had a vote behind closed doors, and Andy Biggs won 30 votes. McCarthy's 38. Not going to win 218 votes without Democrat support, which means he's going to have to figure out some way to make a deal. And already, so he's not going to. There is no planet where Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker of the House in 2024. It doesn't exist. They don't have the votes for it. He doesn't have the control of the caucus for it. It just will not happen. Some random story, whether it's true or not, is going to happen. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to demand that they impeach Joe Biden, or some crazy or shit. But the reason I want to talk about Schiff very quickly is he said, I believe it was today, that he's going to kick Ilhan Omar and Adam Schiff off of their committees.
There
And
was
he
a
said
third one too. It was Omar, Schiff. Oh shit.
I haven't seen anything for a third one.
But keep going. I'll look it up.
The Schiff one we know is because they're talking about the spy stuff, and then the Omar one is because he said anti-Semitism.
Oh damn it. He brought his daughter in when Pelosi gave her resignation or gave her speech the other day. I'm blanking on his name. He ran for president. He's a member of the House, good-looking younger guy.
That's not Schiff.
No. Schiff is the older guy on the shit. Keep going. Swalwell. Okay. Swalwell. It's Swalwell. He's the other one that McCarthy's going to kick off committees.
Oh, okay. Anyway, his statement about anti-Semitism. I want to remind you who Kevin McCarthy, who the two Republicans that were kicked off of their committees were, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, who back-to-back years, now this was 2020, when they had their APAC, when they had their CPAC, they also had APAC, which was run by Nick Fuentes, and Paul Gosar showed up to it, and people rightly called them out for it. And then in between then and the next year, they tried to do their white nationalist caucus, literally their white nationalist caucus. And then the next year, Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke at the same fucking event. And then there was that other, I don't remember if this was tied to this or something else she said, where they had to send Marjorie Taylor Greene to the Holocaust Museum and do a book report about why she was being anti-Semitic. So like let's not pretend that anti-Semitism is a good enough a reason. When you have these people.
If you were applying the standard equitably, I mean, there would be probably for every Democrat you could accuse credibly of anti-Semitism, there'd be 3 to 5 Republicans that you could, accuse under the same standard. 100%. It's a completely asymmetrical set of standards.
And this is actually really relevant because Kanye is apparently talking to Nick Fuentes before a presidential run, and anti-Semitism is on the rise because now Kyrie's allowed to come back. That's a whole separate topic for another day. Anti-Semitism is not. I disagree with what's going on politically in Israel. I can disagree with what the incoming Netanyahu government is doing and still support the existence of Israel.
Outgoing, right? He lost, right?
No, he just won. I'm pretty sure he just won. I think they just won. He just won in the last election.
Oh my God. Okay.
Criticizing Israel does not make you anti-Semitic. Like the government. In the same way that I can criticize the government of Italy and not be anti-Christian. The same way that I can criticize the government in America and not be anti-American. Just because you support the existence of Israel does not mean that you cannot criticize it, and just because you support it does not mean you can say other anti-Semitic shit. Like, to be clear, literally every single time Donald Trump has spoken before a group of Jews, he says the same line. Every single time he says this. He says, Jews should love me more because I support Israel and they don't support Israel enough. And he always says something to that effect every single time. And at least the last time he pointed to the reason it is. It's because evangelicals support Israel. And the reason evangelicals support Israel is because according to them, you need to have an Israel to exist so that the planet can end in their rapture.
Holy shit, he won again. It was just last year he was ousted. I didn't realize he ran and won again. Sure enough, Bibi will be back as prime. Oh my God. They cannot get rid of him. How many years was he prime minister?
A long time.
Oh my God. Yeah, I did not see that at all.
One of the people I work with is Israeli, and he was talking about it as well.
Holy shit. Okay, well, yeah. No, to your point, yes. I mean, and that was one of the things about Ilhan Omar is, I mean, she's obviously very vocal of the Israeli government, and she's always been accused of anti-Semitism. Now, I think she did apologize for one comment because
It was the Benjamin comment.
it was about Bibi.
No. She was talking about
all about the Benjamins. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Which, look, to be fair, very poorly phrased.
And she apologized for it because she's like,
yes.
I realize that could play into, even though it's a legitimate criticism of the Israeli government, it was
The
phrased in a
phrasing
way
was
that
bad.
could be, that could lead into anti-Semitic tropes. And she apologized.
Similar to the ones that like Tucker Carlson made a documentary about, the fact that they always pick on George Soros, the fact that they even did. Look, Dave Chappelle talked about it, and Dave Chappelle said some anti-Semitic shit for his monologue on SNL. Like the idea of Jews controlling Hollywood and the way that they describe it, like, oh, you can't talk about it. It's like that's not what it is. But that's not the point. So anyway, going back to the Schiff thing. Feinstein should resign just because she has dementia, and then it doesn't matter whether Schiff is there anyway. So then they
Newsom, I think, can just replace her with whoever he wants. Yeah.
So that would solve that. I don't know if Schiff could win Feinstein's seat in an actual election. I imagine he probably could, but like, I don't care. Feinstein really should not be in
no,
government.
100%. I mean, there are credible reports that she's at times like barely coherent, right? And she's 89 anyway, not to be ageist, but there's a correlation between a decline in cognitive faculties as you get older. I mean, like listen, it pisses me off when people make these allegations about President Biden because, number one, President Biden on his worst day, I mean, he's always been a gaffe machine, period. And I agree that the frequency of gaffes has increased with time. There's no doubt about it. But this idea that Donald Trump is like a beacon of mental or cognitive health is bullshit. Biden on his worst day is a better speaker than Donald Trump on his best, period. Donald Trump, bigly, guys, like, it's just like he's an inelegant, inarticulate speaker. Biden might stumble, but he has an excellent vocabulary. He knows politics very well. He's excellent with foreign policy. This man is still a substantive thinker, period. Now, he's more of a gaffe machine than I would like because, I mean, obviously as, streamers and debaters, I can't pretend that I don't care about.
That's also the other thing. Like, you and I talk to people,
right.
even in jobs that don't require you to have like when I'm my other job, I work as a physical therapy tech. Even talking to some of my coworkers, I don't speak like I forget words and stuff all the time.
Sure.
I'm 30. Like, it's not like everybody forgets words. Like, Joe Biden are just magnified because he's the fucking president. But like, come on, guys. Like, Donald Trump, the camera woman person,
TV,
whatever yeah, no, it's different. Like, Feinstein is incredibly like she has no fucking clue.
Yeah. Is there any sort of recall process, I wonder, that Governor Newsom can initiate? I doubt it, but
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because you can't have a process like that, because at some point you'll end up with a state that's like West Virginia. You have a red state.
Yeah, they'd snatch Manchin out of there with a quickness. I don't know if you know this, but so having my previous state I lived in was Kentucky. And previously it was the same as it was in Kentucky as it was in most states, which is that if a senator fails to serve out his term or her term, they can be replaced by the governor. And the governor of Kentucky is a phenomenal Democrat named Andy Beshear. And McConnell got the Republican supermajority in Kentucky to pass a law that says that the governor has to select a name off a list provided by the majority in the state assembly. Just completely, taking just disarming Beshear of the opportunity to to name a Democratic replacement. And I think it was about the time that there were serious questions about McConnell's health because it looked like his hand was necrotic.
Well, when he was when he was melting or whatever, because he fell down. Yeah, that's old people shouldn't look like that.
Well, no, I think it was because, if I remember correctly, I read an article that his supply of virgin blood did not make it to him in time. So he was starting to decay, as vampires often do. But now he has a steady supply, so he's clinging to life.
That makes sense. He's an evil turtle.
Yes.
Actually, can we talk about the Senate very briefly?
Yeah.
Because like the House is a mess. Like the best thing we're going to see is they're not going to be able to govern. They're going to do frivolous investigations. Like if you want a really good breakdown of what's going on with the Hunter Biden stuff, Some More News did a whole video on it, and it's fantastic. Uh, I,
Yes.
I generally say you should watch them anyway because I think he does a really good job.
Phenomenal. Cody Johnson's great. And
I
follow him
loved
on
it when
Twitter too. Outside of the YouTube channel, he's hilarious.
I loved him when he was on Cracked, and I he's still really good. The Senate. So McConnell's facing some type of challenge. No, not a serious one, but because the person they put up is Rick Scott. Now, this is very funny for two reasons. One, Rick Scott definitely lost them seats. If not in the House, definitely in the Senate. He definitely lost some seats in that because of his plan. It was garbage. Two, Rick Scott is in charge of getting senators elected for the Republicans. It's his fucking job to do it. Not McConnell's, it's Rick Scott's. And in the middle of the race, I think this is in like April, there was a whole bunch of stories about Rick Scott mismanaging money, which is very funny that they put the guy to oversaw the largest Medicare fraud in charge of all of their fucking money.
Yeah, they learned nothing. As a matter of fact, I want to say that I read in the news somewhere that, I hope I'm not making this up, that some people are floating either congressional or perhaps law enforcement investigation over the funds that Scott was managing,
I think I saw something about
as
that
far
too.
as like GOP reelection bids. It's funny for a couple of reasons. Okay, so we talked earlier about how the general strategy that Republicans employed was bad for many reasons. Okay, so number one, they use say what?
They didn't have any policies. That seems like the big number one.
Well. Actually, I was getting to that. So that's their tried and true strategy for like the past 2 or 3 election cycles. And I understand why they think that it would work, because it's worked in the past. Like they didn't have a genuine platform in 2020, and they gained seats in 2020. They lost the Senate, but McConnell's strategy has always been make it a referendum on the sitting president, lean into the contrarian obstructionist role. Don't offer something that Democrats can attack. Don't give them something. Then, of course, Scott, in theory, has the idea like, no, our base wants some sort of message. But as you said, gave them the wrong damn message. Like if you're going to give them a platform, make it a popular one, But if they offered a popular...
You mean cutting Social Security and Medicare is not popular?
Dude, I know it sounds counterintuitive. I know it sounds ridiculous, but apparently not. But what's interesting is, if they offered a popular platform, I don't think they could be Republican. Like, I think it's like mutually exclusive. If you're a politician and you offer something that the majority of Americans want consistently, by definition, I don't think you can be a Republican. I think you're like,
no, you can, because Donald Trump ran on Medicare for all. He just didn't call it that. And he didn't have any plans to actually implement it.
To follow through with it, right?
But he was also popular ideas. You're just full of shit.
Well, he's also, very atypical for Republicans. So, like, I laugh all the time because he's not conservative. That's one of the reasons why he's so fascistic. Is like a fascist. He's ideologically inconsistent, but that's neither here nor there. So what's funny is I feel like the not offering a policy strategy would have worked had they not paired it with shitty candidates and crazy candidates. So you have people like Herschel Walker and others who are just nuts, and then they didn't successfully repudiate or purge the election denialism. I think if they had ran standard Republican candidates that were not crazy and not election deniers, I think they would have gotten away with the just blame everything on Biden and Democrats and not offer a policy position of your own, because they've been rewarded for it in repeated elections in the past. They punch way above their weight class for a party that has not had an affirmative or popular policy message in arguably decades. So I think McConnell's probably pissed at Scott, like, dude, if we'd have just picked better candidates, if we'd have managed the finances better, if you were going to if you were going to go rogue and offer a policy platform, offer one that's not like that bad, then I think they could have done McConnell's approach and just make it all about Biden, all about Biden, all about Biden. But the beauty of it was this was like a perfect storm where they did everything wrong. So anyway, I just want to comment on that. The other thing, just to go back to the House briefly for a second, I agree with you. Nothing's going to come out of the House other than just message. It's just going to be Benghazi 2.0, except this time about Hunter Biden's laptop. They said that they're also interested in pursuing. Who's Glazy? I thought you
I
quit
think that's
stream.
me. No, I didn't quit. I've just been busy.
Oh gosh. What was I saying? It'll be Benghazi 2.0. They did say that they were going to potentially look into, the origins of Afghanistan. Although I don't know if they're going to do that, given that that will ultimately lead back to the Trump administration, because they, signed the Doha Agreement, which set the stage up for failure in Afghanistan in the first place. But what's interesting to me, and I've subscribed to Fox News just to watch the Cope and enjoy the Schadenfreude. But when they interview Republicans, so Biden always gets the question, what are you going to do to work with Republicans? Doesn't matter if his party's in the majority or the minority. Doesn't matter. What are you going to do, Mr. President, to work with the Republicans? Republicans never get that question, not from conservative reporters, and I don't think even from mainstream reporters. The onus is always on Democrats to reach across the aisle, which to me is emblematic of the double standard which pervades the political ecosystem. Everyone expects more from Democrats. Everyone, not just conservatives, but independents, moderates, and Democrats. They all expect more out of Democrats from Republicans, and that's bullshit. Why isn't everyone asking, Mr. Probable House Speaker McCarthy, what are you going to do to work with the president? You campaigned on, inflation's high, gas prices are high, crime is high. What are you going to do to work with the president to solve these issues? Do you also see that? Nobody asked them that question ever?
That's why there's always that fake New York Times headline. It's like, something good happens, but this is why it's actually bad for Joe Biden. Like that type of stuff. So yeah, no, there's never any expectation that they're actually gonna do the right thing, which is why nobody ever asked them on their policies, which is why they were like, oh yeah, crime is bad because of Democrats doing this, or inflation is bad because of Democrats. What are Democrats going to do to fix it? So they're running on it. What are they going to do to fix it?
Right. So that leads us into the first little video that I want to watch here, and leading into their first major policy proposal. While I tee it up, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Trying to think. Abortion. Oh, actually, if they do want to blame McConnell for something, they actually can. It's McConnell's fault that they have the. I don't know is that race still not called yet? The Arizona AG race. I
didn't see where AG was. Hang on one second.
If they want to blame McConnell for something, they can blame him for the fact that he effectively packed the Supreme Court, which then overturned Roe. I guess that's the biggest thing you can blame McConnell for. But they're going to win anyway because I think they are about to or just overturned affirmative action. They're potentially just going to overturn all elections anyway. In the Harper case, they gutted the EPA with the Clean Air and Water Act. It doesn't matter. And that's the other thing. One of the same-sex marriage bill that is really funny that passed, that Ben Shapiro was losing his shit over because he's a massive homophobe. Part of that bill was also for interracial marriage, and the reason all that was necessary is because of the actual things that the justices wrote when they overturned Roe.
Justice Thomas
Mitch McConnell is in an interracial marriage and voted against that bill.
So who is? Oh, McConnell. Yeah, to Elaine Chao. Yeah. So what's interesting is, which by the way, I'm glad that they were able to pass this bill because it's some sort of codification. But I think you could easily make the argument it adds too much wiggle room because it doesn't require, if state law doesn't require same-sex marriage, or doesn't allow for same-sex marriage, it doesn't have to. You would have to go to a state that does recognize same-sex marriage, get married, and then that's when the federal law that they just passed would kick in. So if Alabama, if it's probably not even an if, I imagine Alabama does not allow same-sex marriage. If you're a homosexual couple in Alabama, you got to go to, wherever, North Carolina, wherever it is, get married. Then the federal law kicks in and requires Alabama to recognize it. But it does not force Alabama to marry you or to.
And it also doesn't force religious places to marry you. It just says that the government can't ignore your marital.
And here's the thing, though. I at least can understand. I can at least, like, if I was going to allow a caveat for anything, I would at least understand, like, look, if a church doesn't want to host your ceremony, whatever. Like, to me, the bigger issue is because marriage is, there's a secular component there. The state, none of the 50 states, not a single one. It doesn't matter how regressively conservative they are. There should not be a caveat on that. If you're a gay couple in Alabama and you want a civil union or get married, like but actually, now that I say that, I don't even know if I'd allow that caveat too, because they also get a tax exemption. Churches
No. States should not. If you're going to give any type of federal benefits to straight couples, it should also be allowed for gay couples.
100%.
The idea that this is going to be like for slippery slopes is like, get fucked. They've been doing slippery slopes arguments forever.
You can do a slippery slope on everything. But yeah, I'm actually going to retract that now because I forgot that churches enjoy special tax exemption status. So it's like, hey, look, you don't want to marry a gay couple? That's cool. You're gonna have to pay taxes now. And then
I don't care. Look, if you want to be a hateful church, be a hateful church.
I just think you should be
the only argument. But you cannot use the look. This is the most frustrating thing I have to deal with when I talk to people who argue religious issues. We're not we're a secular country. Like,
right.
We're not a religious, like the Lauren Boebert saying that the Bible should dictate the country. No, like that's not how it is.
Well, she had it asked backwards. She said that there is no separation of church and state. The only real separation of church and state is that the state should not, impact, the state should not impact church, but church should be able to impact state. Like, it's supposed to be a one-sided relationship. It's like, nah. I mean, it's very clearly articulated in the First Amendment, right? That First Amendment that you all appeal to when it's convenient and then disregard it the second it becomes cumbersome.
We're not like, if you want to live in a theocracy, go to a theocracy. We're not a theocracy.
100%. Real quick, hang on a second. Okay. Want to make sure people. All right. Hear that?
Nope.
Okay. Let me stop screen sharing. Share system audio. Share audio.
Is this the rollout?
Our country faces a clear choice.
Okay. Well, listen to this video for a second, and then we'll go from there. All right. It's 58 seconds long.
Our country faces a clear choice.
You want to maximize?
I know the last few years have been tough.
It's a choice between two different philosophies and two different futures.
Carnage and darkness and despair.
A choice between soaring inflation and skyrocketing energy costs, or affordable rents and gas and groceries for you and your family.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal.
This is a choice between whether we have an open border or a secure border.
These are hard things.
A choice between protecting criminals or protecting law-abiding Americans.
Fear and lies.
Republicans have a plan for a new direction that will get our country back on track. Our plan is a commitment to America.
Okay, I have lots of thoughts on this. First, I really find it funny that all the Biden scenes were from the that one speech,
Independence Hall speech,
Hall, which is like the best thing he did in his president when it came to speeches. Like, yes. that was an amazing speech, like possibly his best speech ever. So yeah, that's the wrong speech to point to. It also didn't entirely match up to what they were saying. And here's the other thing you have to understand, like with the Republicans, every time they're trying to take back the House, they're all part of doing that Gingrich idea, where the New Deal to Americans, or whatever the fuck you call it. Except when you actually look at what happened, like they were like he unveiled that like 10 minutes before the election happened. Like that.
Yeah, that's not what they campaigned on at all.
Yeah, it's not. And you know what? The other thing to that and this is a very key point. You know what was missing in that video?
A plan.
Yeah, there was not a single policy point then, and that's like this is funny because this may be the only right thing Benny Johnson said. He said the reason that they lost is because there was no clips of Kevin McCarthy like laying down smack to have a policy point or something that could go viral. That's true, because that's what Kevin McCarthy is, because he can't go viral because they don't have any type of policies. Like look, we can harp on this all day. There is zero policy positions. Like if you think that they're going to do, or like even the things he's saying that are a difference between law-abiding and secure borders. Let's break some of these things down. So he said law-abiding Americans and criminals. Well, the former president of the United States is a well-known criminal and is currently under investigation for like 6 different things, including now being under special counsel investigation, which Marjorie Taylor Greene said that she could potentially defund somehow, but I don't know if that's true or not. Anyway, they're going to defend that, but they're going to be pushing for retribution for the January 6th people, the people who got prosecuted for that. There's also, there's red state murder problem that 40%, the top 10 states with the highest murder rate is
8 of them are red. 8 of the top 10 states with the highest crime per capita are red, right?
And that's because, look, crime is not just a policy. Well, crime is a policy issue. A lot of times the reason those are, and I think I remember this exact article, it points out to the fact that the reason these states have higher crime rates is because they're generally underfunded. They don't have good schools. They don't have good social safety nets, and they don't have good paying jobs, which leads people to crime.
Sure. Because poverty, poor health are correlated with crime. And that goes to show, I mean, so I just finished a script it'll be my first scripted video essay. I don't know how long it'll be because I haven't done the run through yet. And just as a preview, I make this point, the fact of the matter is the Republican Party, and this is kind of the theme in what we're about to get into, where I wanted to tee this up, was the Republican Party is not a serious governing party. And people, by and large, they say they expect them to be, but they very often don't hold their feet to the fire. It goes back to that double standard where Democrats are expected to do everything and do everything perfectly, whereas a Republican can be competitive against a Democrat because of systemic advantages and lower expectations, and they don't have to do shit. And if you look at red states. I know people will say, well, what about Florida? What about Texas? Well, they have their problems, number one, number two. But the fact of the matter is, on average, red states trail blue states in terms of health, education, safety, weight, right? Because unfortunately, red states tend to be heavier, all kinds of issues. And by the way, red states are much more likely to require federal subsidies to function. Talk about fiscal responsibility. Most states that rely the most on the teat of the federal government are red states. So you want to talk about governance and policy? By and large, there are some exceptions in some areas, but by and large, Republicans suck at running things, suck at it. Like, it's just a fact. This is and of course, people like Ben Shapiro try to spin it the other way around. Oh, California is such a hellscape. Oh, blah, blah, blah. New York's such a hellscape. And certainly blue states have their issues. There's no doubt about it. But overall, they tend to be high. They tend to be better educated. They tend to be less poor. They tend to be healthier. Just all these things. And they tend to be safer per capita as well. But the reason I want to play that clip from McCarthy was, so that was a rare moment, as vague as it was. And that was actually an excerpt of a broader speech that he gave in, I think it was Scranton. It wasn't Scranton. I'm sorry. It was somewhere in Pennsylvania. That was his commitment to America speech. And it was a speech in which he said, look, we have a plan. Didn't exactly go into what it was, but, we need to fight inflation. We need to lower the cost of living, lower the cost of gas. We need to make America safer. We need to have a future built on freedom. So it was like this mix of specific, not policy plans, but specific calls to action for policy, like fight inflation, there's not a plan, but it's at least a specific item, like we need to reduce inflation. Then it was mixed with a bunch of platitudes about making a future built on freedom, whatever the hell that means. But here's what I find so fucking funny about all of that. That was the first and only time, the closest the Republican Party ever came to offering any sort of affirmative policy agenda outside of defund Medicare, sunset Medicare and these social safety programs. And this is the very first thing that they did when they got the majority on Wednesday. Wednesday was when they secured their 218 seat minimum needed to take the majority in the House. What was the first congressional policy initiative they announced the next day on Thursday? A probe in Hunter Biden. So I want to watch this for just a second. Again, for the benefit of the audience. Tell me if you can hear that.
Biden, at the very least, has been dishonest with the American people, and we need to realize whether or not this administration's compromised because of Hunter's shady business dealings. So the purpose of our investigation moving forward in January, when we become the majority and I have subpoena power, is to determine whether or not Joe Biden is in fact compromised because of his family's shady business dealings.
So that is James Comer, Republican out of Kentucky. He's going to run the House Oversight Committee, pledging to make the investigation into President Biden and his son a top priority in the new Congress. Headline of today's New York Post: House Hunters. GOP vows to expose the Biden cash scheme. Ohio Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, he was there yesterday, currently ranking member House Judiciary Committee. How you doing, sir? Good morning to you. Thank you for your time. I'm trying to find Bill. I'm trying to game this.
Say what?
You might have wanted to put it on 1.5 instead of.
I have it on 1.5. It was still too fast. I am going to put it on 1.25 though, because I do like to speed things up a little bit so we can get straight to the commentary on our part.
Here's what I've come up with. Fill in the blanks and tell me where we're headed here. You will not subpoena a sitting president. That means Joe Biden while he's in office. DOJ's not going to give you what you want. You could subpoena Hunter or Jim Biden, and they could either refuse that subpoena or they could take the fifth. How do you get at this story come January 3rd?
Well, I think Congressman Comer has been clear. You look at the suspicious activity reports, and what's interesting, Bill, is for the first time, the Biden administration changed the process and the protocols around getting access to these suspicious activity reports. And understand, this is a report filed by a bank, a financial institution, to the Treasury Department. In previous administrations, in the Trump administration, Obama administration, Bush administration, Congress, congressional committees could have access to those and could see those. This administration said, no, we're changing the policy. So there's 150 out there. It's been in the press, 150 out there on Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and the Biden business family business operation, but the committee has only been able to see 2. So Congressman Comer, who will be Chairman Comer of the Oversight Committee, said, I want to see the other 148. So I don't know if he'll go through the banks, the financial institutions to get access to that, or what he'll do, but I think that's probably where this thing starts. My overarching concern is the politics at the Justice Department. You cannot have a Justice Department that's political, because if you do, you no longer have what makes America the greatest country in the world. One of the things that makes us the greatest country ever is this idea that it's equal treatment under law, and we don't have that. So that's my overarching concern. And we know that the FBI, Mr. T-Bold at the FBI, according to a whistleblower who went to Mr. Grassley, was suppressing information about the Hunter Biden story just days and weeks before the presidential election in 2020. And we know the FBI also went and talked to Facebook and said, be on the lookout for Russian disinformation. And that happened to be just timed at the same time you had 51 former intel officials write the now famous letter that this has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation.
I grant you there are a ton of questions out there. You got 2 years to do this, and they can run the clock on you. That must be a concern when you're trying to find an answer.
Well, it's always a concern, particularly when they haven't complied with any of the requests from Mr. Comer that he's already sent. They've changed the process on access to suspicious activity reports and denied us a chance to do that when it was always been able to do that before. And now we learned yesterday that they set up some special office the Democrats have to come after Mr. Comer, Mr. McCarthy, myself, and to attack the people doing the investigation. So what we're going to do is everything we can within the Constitution, do our duty to get the facts and the truth to the American people, because you don't change the politics at the DOJ if you first don't expose just how bad it's gotten and what really has been going on there. So that's part of our duty as members of Congress when we take the oath of office on January 3rd to uphold the Constitution. Part of our duty is to make sure the country gets the truth and the facts. We're committed to doing that.
This might be your first witness. On with Sean Hannity last night, Tony Babalinsky.
It's crazy that we're actually still talking about this 2 years after I've come public. 1,000% Joe Biden is the big guy. Multiple whistleblowers have come forward with a whole trove of facts that corroborate everything I've said, as well as add incremental information to it. And I think the American people are going to see those facts. I think they're going to be shocked by those facts, and hopefully justice is served.
Last comment. Hopefully justice is served. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, think how the story has changed, Bill. When it first came out 2 years ago, it was, well, it's not his laptop. Then it was, well, maybe it's his laptop and it's Russian disinformation. And then it was, well, okay, it's his laptop. It's not Russian disinformation, but Joe Biden wasn't involved. And now it's all the way to the point where Joe Biden knew about it, even though he said he didn't. But it didn't influence, the Politico said this yesterday, but it didn't influence his decision-making. His son's business dealings had no impact on the decisions he made as president. Well, that's a long way from, I had no knowledge of my son's business operations and it was Russian disinformation. So the story has changed dramatically from the White House and from the Democrats. Our job is to get the facts and the truth for the American people.
Does this start in January, yes or no?
Mr. Comer indicated yesterday that he plans on starting right away. Frankly, it's already started. That's why we issued the 30-page report that the committee put out yesterday.
Jim Jordan, thank you for your time. We'll speak
Thank
again.
you, Bill.
Thank you.
All right, Fresh, you want to weigh in on that?
I have a lot to weigh on it. So first off, everything Bobulinski said is a lie. Just straight up. There is no evidence. First off, how do I explain this? So the laptop itself is Hunter Biden's. The files on the laptop are what's in dispute. There's a Washington Post and a Huffington Post article on this in March, I believe, that basically said, yeah, we can verify some of this, but like we can't verify all of this. These files are all over the place. They seem to be added and during our investigation, like it doesn't seem to be accurate. Again, there's some more news video goes into this way more about like how it might actually be a Russian disinformation thing. Anyway, as for the just for what Jim Jordan says, I have no idea about the changing in the rules. I'm prone to believe that he's lying because he's Jim Jordan and he's talking, but I don't actually know if there's a difference there.
Yeah, his mouth is open. Just real quick, to your point about the emails, the vast majority of the data, according to a forensic audit from the Washington Post, says the vast majority of the data and most of the nearly 129,000 emails the hard drive contained could not be verified by either of the two security experts who reviewed the data for the Post. So you are correct.
Yeah, it's not there's never been any smoking gun. And also, like, let's be clear about this. The most that Hunter Biden is guilty of is nepotism.
And he's hardly alone. And we'll come back to that about the Trump thing, by the way, because I imagine that your next comment's going to be, you know, who else is guilty of nepotism? So we'll talk about the Trump nepotism thing in a minute if you want to continue.
But yeah, like this should be important. Like you should be aware of what their priority is, and it's this fucking witch hunt. And to the other point, like I forget what the name of the Fox host was. He had a good point. It's like they can just stall you out. Yeah. You know when fucking Don McGahn had to talk to people for stuff he witnessed in 2016, 2018, 2019. Like, it was 2 years later. They don't have to answer you to dick. Like, get fucked, man. That's a system. You've shown very well that you don't want to have talking about it. And this is another thing, too. Some of these people are probably under investigation anyway. And I'm talking about the Republicans for things that they have done in relationship to January 6th. They took Scott Perry's phone. There's a couple of them that were doing pardons that were involved in some of these things that might be under investigation for a whole bunch of different stuff anyway. That may be you can't, if you're under investigation and you're asking questions, especially if they do this for the January 6th stuff, they're not going to be able to tell you because you are a subject of the investigation. Like, this is insanity. And it's very clear that they're just going to make shit up for this. Like, that's the problem. And it's imperative for anybody outside of Fox News, because Fox News isn't going to give a shit, to point out the fact that this is just nonsense. Like, the Hunter Biden laptop story doesn't actually tie Hunter Biden into anything. Because even if these deals happen, it doesn't appear that, or these meetings happen, that any substantial policies or money exchanges came from them.
No. And as a matter of fact, because this is the other thing. I mean, there's several things. I'm with you. Hunter, this will be, if they follow through with this, and I have no doubt that they will, this will be the at least the fourth federal level investigation into Hunter Biden. This is huge. And again, the mainstream media very often doesn't do a good job of covering this as well. But this is really, really important. Number one, Hunter Biden was the subject of a congressional investigation already by Senate Republicans in 2020. Chuck Grassley, and I think, who's the guy? Who's the Wisconsin senator? Man, I'm blanking on his. Huh?
Ron Johnson?
I think it was Ron Johnson. I know it was Chuck
I can't
Glass.
believe he fucking won.
Yeah, I know. That's a tragedy. That guy is just a goon of the highest order. But they did an investigation into Homeland Security and the finance committees, Senate, Homeland Security and Senate finance committees, when Republicans still held the Senate before the 2020 election. They investigated Hunter Biden and his overseas dealings, and they were forced to conclude in their report that they had no evidence of wrongdoing. So that's one federal level investigation by a Republican Congress. It was just Benghazi all over again. They ran the numbers, they made a scandal about it, and then they were like, well, okay, we don't really have our smoking gun. Okay, number one. There was another federal level investigation which began under the Obama administration into Hunter Biden's taxes. And that's where we found that he had a $2 million tax liability, which he has since paid off. But that began under the Obama administration. So he wants to talk about the politicization of the Department of Justice. Let's think about the integrity, the relative integrity at the bare minimum about Justice departments. Joe Biden was the sitting vice president for Barack Obama, but the Barack Obama Justice Department investigated the vice president's son. Compared to the Trump administration, that is an act of superhuman integrity.
Which also we know was targeted at his political opponents.
Yes.
Like we know this. We know they were looking at making up Antifa stuff. We know that part of the Time Warner deal, it appears that they were trying to push it so Jeff Zucker resigned in order for that deal to go through. Like we know that this is stuff that they have done.
Right. And that's what I mean. You say there were plenty of ethical scandals under the Obama administration. I mean, that we could get into. I mean, that's where the whole
Fast and Furious.
Yes. But then who was the guy? He's in Russia now. Man, I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, Edward Snowden.
Snowden. Thank you. So, I mean, there's no question about it that the Obama administration was not ethically pure. But again, we're talking relatively speaking. They were willing to open an investigation into the son of the sitting vice president. That would never happen to Trump's kids under the Trump administration. Bill Barr would never investigate Ivanka and Jared. And again, we'll come to that in a minute. So that began under the Obama administration and continued under the Trump administration. And that's where we found out about the $2 million tax liability that Hunter was responsible for. He has since paid off. So that's the second federal level investigation. The third one began under the Trump administration in 2018 by a U.S. attorney, David Weiss, appointed by Trump into Hunter's overseas businesses, his consulting work. And this is the kicker. This is, again, the kicker. It was allowed to continue under the Biden administration. Okay,
also,
there
the
again,
Durham investigation was allowed to continue under the Biden administration.
Right. 100%. So again, I'm not here to stand for Democrats in the sense that I don't think that they're perfect, but we're talking relatively speaking. There is no question that by and large, the Democratic Party is by far morally superior to the Republican Party. And this is something that we all need to talk about more. I know you and I do, but people in chat and others as well, we need to harp on this. You want to talk about Hunter Biden? Hunter Biden's been investigated 3 times, and the Biden administration has allowed Biden has the authority to fire or demand the resignation of U.S. attorneys, and he allowed Weiss, a Trump appointee, to continue investigating Biden's son. That, again, is an act of superhuman political integrity that we would never get from a Republican. No Republican would ever allow. Can you imagine Trump coming into office and finding out that Obama had opened up an investigation into Ivanka? He would kill it day one. Day one and be done.
Also, there's another difference. Hunter Biden's a private citizen.
Yes.
Like the investigations into Don Jr. and them were
would be
into
justified.
The Trump organization.
Would be absolutely justified and are absolutely justified because they're public officials. They violated.
Well, no, not Don Jr. Don Jr. was I'm talking about the actual investigations that were going on in New York were to their organization. They weren't to the actual kids because of made up stuff. It's because, and I want this to be repeated every single time, the Trumps are not legally allowed to run a fucking charity in New York without oversight because they kept stealing from kids with cancer. It'd be a different thing if we're talking about investigating Jared Kushner or Ivanka, who are active members of the Trump White House, who deserve to be investigated because Jared Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis.
Trump got
Right.
$1 billion from the Saudis.
6 months after the Trump administration ended. Meanwhile, he was basically the special envoy to Saudi Arabia for most of the Trump administration, at least since 2019. And where were Republicans on that? Where were Republicans?
And how many fucking stories have we gotten from them overcharging for their hotels? Like a
Secret
dozen?
Service? Yes. Or what about the Chinese and Japanese trademarks that were streamlined that for Ivanka's businesses, which were filed either before or during Trump's inauguration? Like,
Yeah,
and
like,
also,
look, I want to also be clear about this thing too. There appears to be some criminal charges for Hunter Biden around the gun stuff about
sure,
his inability.
he lied. He lied on
Yeah.
that federal form.
And if
at
there's
least as far
criminal
as we know.
penalties, do it. Because here's the thing, I don't give a shit. Like the last time I argued this with somebody was Rob, and he was talking something about Hillary Clinton, and my response was lock her ass up too. I don't give a shit.
And he would never say that. That's the thing, Mr. Whataboutism. That's where one of the things that frustrates me about Rob and Lecture Fan and others like them with the whataboutisms. They think they'll get us on the whataboutisms. Yeah, well, you would just defend Hunter Biden. No, I don't care. If Hunter, like you said, he lied on a federal form for that gun purchase, as far as what we know about his past drug abuse. If they want to charge him for it, so be it, because the sons of sitting presidents should also not be above the law. But where was that standard when it was President Trump's kids? Like you said, who were not private citizens, who were active senior members of the Trump administration, setting White House policy. They did not divest themselves of their private businesses. Ivanka has an ownership stake in the Trump Hotel in D.C. Where were all the foreign dignitaries going when they came to D.C.? Trump Hotel. So between the trademarks, Trump Hotel, Jared's Saudi Arabia deal, we're talking about orders of magnitude disparity.
And also, like we're talking like the close. So the numbers that I understand is it was about $50,000 per year for Burisma, which turned out to be, we already know from the first impeachment that's already nonsense. I think we're talking between 10 and 12 million. I think 12 million is the upside on some of these deals that they supposed. While in the White House, Jared and Ivanka made like $84 million. Like
64 is what I saw.
Is that what it is?
640. I saw 640 million. Let me look this up while we're talking here.
Okay, because I remember doing the math on this during the first impeachment. He would have had to work for Burisma for like 150 years to equal the same salary that they made. And that's even including whether or not they okay. But like, look, we don't know directly, because I think if I'm correct in that article, it doesn't say where all their money comes from. So even including like this is the thing. You go into you politics, especially at the high level, and you make a fuck ton of money. I think Nancy Pelosi, like the fact that they don't ban stock trading is fucking criminal.
There's a level of corruption there too with Pelosi and certain Democrats as well. But again, for every one Democrat that engages in that sort of shenaniganry, you can find 2 or 3 Republicans who get busted for the same shit. It is truly mind-boggling that on virtually every sort of crime, it's a weird 2 to 3 to 1 ratio. The Republican Party is just objectively more corrupt. But to your point, I agree. They should ban, the insider or the stock trading for sitting members of Congress and their family members. Absolutely, because it's just rife with abuse, and Democrats are guilty of it as well, but not equally guilty. And that's where
make it good. It doesn't.
No, I agree. But I guess I'm kind of like you in the sense I'm tired of ceding ground. I try to do some for good faith, to show that, like, genuinely, I don't care what happens to Hunter Biden. I mean, besides the common care that I give to any human being, right? I don't want anything bad to happen to him, but if he deserves, prosecution and conviction, all for it. Fine. Don't care. But I'm tired of indulging. And I feel like, again, commentators, Chuck Todd, so many people are so guilty of this, indulging in the false equivalence.
And also there's something to be mentioned about like the humanity of this, because Hunter Biden's business deals and the Hunter Biden with the massive drug problem that we are well aware of are 2 separate things. The fact that on 2 separate occasions we've had videos of Joe Biden legitimately being a supportive father. We had the audio that was released a couple months ago of him being like, hey man, I love you. I don't know what to do, but I'm here for you. Like I love you. And they're
You
like,
need help. Yep.
yeah,
Please get
like,
help.
Like, what fucking monster looks at that and goes, yeah, that's gonna get him. That's gonna hurt my opponent. Like, what the fuck, man? That's different. Like, should Hunter, like, Hannity has run this a couple times where they have like pictures of the laptop of Hunter Biden like having sex, and he keeps playing these on his show. That's not relevant to anything.
No, that's shitty as hell. I mean, it really is.
It's just like, get over it. Like, nobody cares.
The party of family values and Jesus Christ, you know,
hate families. They hate families. They just do. They hate you. That's really all there is to it. But like, that's where it is. So I don't know how much more. Look, the whole point of this is Benghazi 2.0. If you thought, like, to be clear, this is the most important point you need to understand for this Republican Party, at least in the House. They're going to run on 2024 being the country is worse off under Democrats, period. That a Republican, United Republican House, Senate, and White House is going to make your lives better. So with that in mind, what policies do you think that they are going to implement to make your lives better that would also go hand in hand with their goal of making the country worse for them to run on this standard? And when you realize that those are the 2 points, you're going to realize that they're not actually going to do anything to help you. The bills that are going to get passed at this point are essentially just the omnibus packaging bills in order to get things done. And then they're going to be whatever lunacy messaging bills come out of the House, because they're going to be like, defund the FBI because they actually tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer and they did January 6th. Or shoot all the migrants at the border because the border is wide open, or release all the fentanyl because this is the other thing. Like, every time they see an article like, oh, this much fentanyl is carried, they're like, oh, this is because of Joe Biden. It's like,
do we really trust them to be the party of fighting inflation and high gas prices? And like, you remember the baby formula thing? I mean, here's the thing. Even if you take them at face value, so let's put ourselves in the mind of and I mean this by its technical definition, ignorant, right? Not stupid, just ignorant. You're a conservative in a red state. You don't follow politics religiously. You hear a Republican say, hey, we're going to fight inflation, fight high gas prices, whatever the issue may be. And you think, okay, well, the most powerful man in the country is a Democrat. There are, according to every headline, Democrat majorities in Congress. This is happening on a Democrat's watch. Okay, we need to switch hands here, and maybe Republicans can solve the problem. This is where, you know, to your point, making them vote for shit, putting it out and then harping on it religiously, endlessly. Like, that's why I'm so happy with the new White House Twitter feed, you know, and it seems like Joe Biden overall has just stepped up his messaging game in a way he should have from the very beginning, where he's constantly got shit prepped, where he's calling out Republicans for their hypocrisy. You know, remember when they were tweeting so-and-so had their PPP loans forgiven?
And that's also like an important thing to remember downstream. Part of the reason that Fetterman walloped Oz is because right at the beginning, he defined Oz as this goofy outsider who wasn't there. And Warnock never did that to Herschel Walker. Like, that's the difference. Like, if you're able to do this quickly, you're able to do it. And the other thing with another good example is their fixes don't mean anything. How many times when the gas prices first spiked did we hear about the Keystone XL pipeline?
Which, number one, wasn't operational and wouldn't have been operational.
It won't be operational. Even if it was finished, it was still under construction. It won't be finished till next year.
Right. And also, it wasn't a producer. It simply funneled like crude, like sand tar oil from Canada to Mexico, right? It was never functional to begin with. There's 7 different ways that whole thing has been debunked. And also, President Biden has approved, and this is, you know, actually runs contrary to his green renewable campaign promises. I understand in short-term political pragmatism why he did it, but Biden is not, you know, the climate bill involved in the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. Those were, relatively speaking, pretty robust climate proposals, still nowhere near what they need to be, but again, relatively speaking. But other than that, Biden's been approving oil permits at a greater rate than Trump. There was like a 34% increase for oil producers to drill on federal land under Biden compared to Trump. So this idea that Biden's not doing enough to let these gas companies drill, no, that's a lie. There is absolutely no federal impediment at this point. They got the leases. They applied for the permit. They were granted the permit. Now it's up to the oil companies to invest in the drilling. Biden can't force them to drill. All he can do is give them permission, which he has. And those 9,000 permits, by the way, that comes out to about 12 million acres of federal land.
And
Federal
also
land
the
being
other
the
thing
only
is that-
type of land that Biden has any control over, which, by the way, again, sidebar, federal land is the smallest amount of land in this country that is drillable, because most land in this country is controlled by states or by private citizens. Biden can't allow companies or he can't give permission to oil companies to drill on state land or on private citizen land, only public land. And he's done it. 12 million federal acres that they can drill on. And then people say, okay, well, it's not the 12 million acres that they want. No, bullshit. They applied for the leases. They chose that land. They were granted the leases. Then they applied for permits to drill on the land that they successfully leased. And they got that too. So Biden's giving them exactly what they asked for. And they're still not drilling. That's not Biden's fault.
Well,
that's the free
obviously,
market's fault.
The solution that the Republicans want is they want the president of the United States to nationalize the oil industry.
Right. And I'm here for it, baby. Now, of course, we take an act of Congress to do it.
I do want to talk to this. This is kind of like this. I think is the best way to summarize the Biden administration, since essentially none of his policies are going to pass for the next 2 years. The Biden administration is not FDR, but it laid the groundwork for the next time that they have a trifecta to do a lot of really good things. They can invest more into green technology. They can push harder for a child tax credit. They can do more for legalizing marijuana. They can do more for student debt relief. There's a lot of policies that are dipping your toes in that are positive policies that can then be built on in future Congresses. Like, that's what it was. And honestly, I think that should have been more of their messaging. That, like, hey, you like these little tidbits you get us? Give us more, we'll feed you more. Like,
no, 100%.
That's he's right. Those bills are fantastic. It's really nice that Joe Biden gave us the infrastructure bill, which is the largest investment of infrastructure ever. It doesn't meet the needs of this country, no, but it's nice that it happened. It's good to see get it in the first place. Like the original bill for the 3 like when they were talking about the infrastructure, there's certain policies that you can't, the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be, just because shit's going to get worse. Infrastructure is one of those. You can't bandage it and be like, oh, it's all good now, because the next time you got to pay more to fix it. There's a hole in your boat. If you don't patch the hole, more holes are going to show up in your boat. And then if you patch one of the 4 holes, there's still 3 fucking holes. You may have dealt with a quarter of them, but it's not the end of it.
No, I mean, I agree. It's definitely it's potential. It's a potential. The Biden administration has the potential to be a foundation for a subsequent transformative Democratic majority or Democratic administration. Again, once they get that trifecta, although it's going to be hard if we can't pass voting rights legislation because, and here's the other thing too. I mean, again, we could fractal off into a gazillion things, but when we're having this conversation and we're talking about, subsequent elections, all I can think of, and just follow me with this, is Brianna Joy Gray. You know Brianna Joy Gray?
Yes.
Despise her. I think she betrayed fundamentally everything that Bernie ever stood for, or just pragmatic democracy, period. I remember Brianna Joy Gray publicly saying things like, the 2016 election doesn't matter. It's no big deal. It's Hillary, whatever. You can pinpoint, we can trace this. We can do a regression all the way back to a single point. If there's an argument to be made about any point in modern U.S. history which has potentially set this country up for failure, it's Trump's presidency, Trump's 2016 victory, and the fact that he was able to cram through three Supreme Court justices. Because the more V. Harper thing is legitimately terrifying. Independent state legislature doctrine is asinine. It's insane. This idea that you can, for those of you who don't know, independent state legislature doctrine, it basically, proponents of it argue the state legislatures should be able to create voting laws and specifically draw voting maps without any checks and balances on state level, meaning a governor can't veto, and more importantly, state courts can't reject it. Even if the state's constitution says that a governor can veto it or that state courts can review it. That's terrifying. It's stupid. It's ridiculous, but it's terrifying.
Worse when you combine it with the fact that they've gutted the Civil Rights Bill, which basically gave the federal government oversight. And they basically said, no, the federal government, if you have an issue with gerrymandered states, you have to take it to the states. So now they're saying you can't take it to the federal government and you can't take it to the state.
Right. Right. So, I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And you're thinking, okay, well, worst case scenario, then ruminate, fresh faces, worst case scenario, that would free up every state to gerrymander the hell out of their populations. The problem is 30 state legislatures are controlled by Republicans. They control the majority of state legislatures because stupidly along the way, we allowed North and South Dakota to be 2 states. We allowed Montana, you know, like every red state with a population of 50 because Republicans.
DC is still not a state.
So yeah, DC isn't. Puerto Rico, you know, this idea. I thought this country was founded on the idea of no taxation without representation. And yet, look at Puerto Rico. Yeah, DC is not a state, and they fight that every step of the way because they know it just goes to show Republicans are not interested in playing a game in good faith because they fear that they'd lose a fair fight. So I'm all for Democrats playing more ruthlessly, but I just find it funny that McCarthy tried to offer some sort of vague affirmative message about, okay, we have a plan and we're going to fight inflation and we're going to fight high gas prices and we're going to fight, cost of living. The very first, not second, not third, the very first move is to announce a probe into Hunter Biden, the 4th federal level investigation into Hunter Biden. And also Bill Hemmer, the Fox News host, note what question he didn't ask Jim Jordan. Like he brought up, he played the devil's advocate a little bit. Well, they can run the clock out on you and you're not willing to subpoena a sitting president. He didn't say, hey, Jim, I understand why you're doing this, but you also said you were going to fight inflation, high gas prices, yada, yada. And it's just, what do you say to the American people who were expecting that to be your first and top priorities? Like, that question is just never asked. Can you imagine? I mean, Biden gets questions like this all the time. Again, Democrats get questions like this all the time. So it's just funny to me how we grade Republicans on a curve. Everybody does it. We have got to stop doing that. And commentators too. That's why I'm on Destiny's ass all the time. God love him. Because this idea that, well, you know, Democrats need to be extra super duper good faith, you know, it's bullshit. It's not fair. It's not right. And Republicans have shown no limiting principle. You give them an inch, they will take a mile. The only way they will stop is if they're beaten again and again and again. That's the only language they understand. If they're led to believe that this strategy will not lead to achieving power, that's the only way that they will course correct.
Well, except that they kind of doubled down on the worst parts of it recently. But it's also worth mentioning, like, we do need to be clear on the definitions. There's this idea of horseshoe theory that Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC are 2 sides to the coin. They're not. Like, look at their policy positions. You may disagree with AOC on how she's doing it, but she actually wants things like lower healthcare, lower cost of living. Like, these are things. Marjorie Taylor Greene believes in space lasers and vengeance policies. Like, that's what we're going to get. They're going to run on vengeance policies. And like, when they would argue, oh, Joe Biden's captured the far left. No, he's not. We didn't even get a fucking police bill. Like, anything to do that. Like, the 8 can't wait bill, nothing got out of that. We didn't get any of that stuff. We got some policies that were moderately to slightly left. The Republican Party is essentially right now in the House, it's under whatever Marjorie Taylor Greene says. That's what they're going to get. There is no, like, you can argue, like, they said that the liberals, the squad had control of it. They didn't. Like we didn't. Jared, fucking what's his face? The New Jersey guy, Gottheimer. He was the one causing the problems. It wasn't the squad. And then so like this is who's pushing the policy is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's objectively one of the dumbest people to ever serve in Congress. Louis Gohmert retired, so you know he has that mantle is passed down. And then another thing, like it's worth mentioning also, like as much as they denigrate the squad and they have their new squad, if you look at the newer, more vocal faces, one group has lost members and the other one grew. And the squad grew. There was like 6 new members in this last class. Madison Cawthorn isn't in Congress anymore. Lord Wilbur won by 500 votes. Like, their reinforcements aren't coming because they can't win. I mean, some of them maybe won. To be fair, there's probably a whole bunch of new crazies that are going to pop up that we don't know about. But like,
that's terrifying that this is just the freshman class of crazy, and there's a new one. There's a new one coming once they become sophomores.
They're not going to they're not equivalent. Like when there was somebody like the beauty of what we're going to see is the country really is going to get more divided. But it's like the centrists are the ones who are going to have to decide. Are you going to go with the far right or the slightly moderately left in comparison to the rest of the world? Because we're such a far right country that like center is considered far left, like actual political center. Like that's like there will still be moderates. Like they'll exist. They'll win in races in places all over the country. But it's going to be the fringe that's going to control it. At least that's the hope for the left, that the fringe is going to have more power now because they're the ones that won. The people who got schlacked in 20 and the people who lost in 22 were not far left candidates. It was the moderate candidates, again, who lost. Sean Patrick Maloney is the moderate candidate, ran from his district, that somebody else then won to push Mondaire Jones out of his district. And they both lost. Like,
and he was, if I remember correctly, he was the equivalent in the House of Rick Scott. He was
the DCCC. So you know who's super happy about this? Jamie fucking Harrison, who shouldn't have that job anyway because he lost to motherfucking Lindsey Graham.
Despite like fundraising him to hell and back. Yeah. Do you remember when Graham was like publicly, they're killing me. I need support. If y'all can invest.
The last like 3 weeks of Graham's campaign were unbelievably disgusting. It was, he was doing no-go zones. Like it was among the most ugliest politics you've ever been seen. And I just want to, I know we didn't get to this, but I do want to talk about this. What the fuck happened to Uvalde? Did you see those numbers?
No, I didn't.
They went like 65 plus for Greg Abbott.
Really?
Yeah. Like I said this a couple of times. Beto was a Uvalde away from winning. At least that's what I thought. Like if there had been if Uvalde had happened like a month out from the election, and then we got the drip of information that came out and how bad they fucked up, I think Beto would have won. But it was too far away. And then now seeing those results, I don't know if that's right anymore. Like I don't understand how you can do this. Because like Greg Abbott is like, he's going to waste more of your money. He's going to get more people killed.
Yeah, Greg Abbott's is fascinating to me because, I mean, you know, I know Uvalde has been dissected to here and back, and I'm pretty sure the Department of Justice said that they were going to look into it on a federal level, which they should, for failures all the way around. And Beto did hit Abbott very hard on, you know, the gun violence just in Texas, period, and also some of the policies. Like I think Abbott was the one who revoked or oversaw the revocation of concealed carry permits, right? Like you don't even need a concealed carry permit now. You just, you know, like you just as long as you legally own a gun, you can.
The Lone Star stuff definitely did not get enough coverage.
Right. And so and that's Uvalde, right? And but then also like the stupid shit, the stunts that he was playing pre-Uvalde with the Biden administration, like the border stuff, right? Where he was, it cost Texas like I think $4.2 billion.
We're talking about the one day where he shut down the border. Yeah.
Yes. $4.2 billion and like so much fresh produce and stuff like that. And again, I right now, my central theme when I engage with other commentators or when I do like my overarching theme is we have got on a fundamental level, on a grassroots level, all the way up, is we've got to reclaim narratives and kill double standards, because we should be seeking a fair fight, because not that we'll win necessarily every time, but our chances are pretty good. But we have to me, one of the reasons that Beto lost and Greg Abbott was able to win re-election, despite, again, Uvalde, the political stunts, the two, sweeping power outages, which happened under his administration because Republicans wanted to keep the fucking grid separate from the rest of the nation, stupidly, just, we're going to be independent. The fact of that Abbott was able to win by such a margin is absurd, because, people, and it's the same thing. It's kind of like the defund the police thing. So people were saying, 2020 was a referendum on defund the police. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that every Democrat should have been running on the idea of defunding the police. That would have been really stupid, right? But defund the police, like, more was made about defund the police by conservative and mainstream media than the handful of like people constantly tar and feather Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was pro defund the police. Those words never left Bernie Sanders' mouth at any point.
No, it's messaging. It's fucking ridiculous.
And again, I'm not saying that we don't have an obligation to do our best to try to bad faith proof messaging attempts or disinformation attempts. Like, we can't just be reckless with our words. I get it. And I understand that sometimes Democrats are reckless with their words. I do remember, and this is what I'm getting to, when Beto O'Rourke was like, hell yeah, we're going to take your guns, which is probably the worst thing you can say in Texas. But he said it one time. He has since retracted it. He's moved it back. And that was like 4 years ago. And so it's amazing to me, the short attention span of the electorate, and yet the ability of conservative media apparatuses to wildly distort particular things said or just hinted at by candidates from years back. It's amazing to me. It's just, I feel like the electorate has just been conditioned, either out of this reflexive need to both sides shit, that like, okay, I guarantee you everybody here in the United States can remember a bad thing that Biden has done, or like a screw up of Biden. Like Hunter Biden's a good example. Like they know everything about the goddamn laptop, everything. A fraction of them know about Jared Kushner's Saudi Arabia deal. A fraction of them know about the Chinese or Japanese trademarks that we mentioned of Ivanka. A fraction of them know about the Secret Service, the exorbitant Secret Service charges. To me, it's all of that. It's a double standard. It's the fact that, we don't have a left-wing media apparatus at all. People talk about the liberal media. I have no doubt that most mainstream reporters vote Republican or vote Democrat. I have no doubt about that. But Jon Stewart said it 10 years ago to Chris Wallace, and I believe it. Mainstream media is not driven by ideology. It's driven by sensationalism. And they will and have thrown Joe Biden under the bus and Democrats under the bus. Like you referenced earlier, the New York Times. New York Times, that liberal rag. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They're eager to criticize Biden. You can find a CNN article, a New York Times article, a WAPO article, whatever, every other week about this is the end of Biden's presidency. Unemployment is so low. Here's why this spells doom for a 2024 Biden. Like, I don't know. And I don't mean to filibuster here, but like, I just feel very, very strongly about it, where every single person has got to mention, like, anytime you go to criticize Democrats, plenty to criticize. But if that sentence ends without a reminder that Republicans are just objectively worse on every level, we failed. Did you see where people were complaining about that NPR article or the headline of that NPR article about Trump's reelection announcement?
Was that the one that was like last seen in Spokane? Yeah.
Yes. Where's the lie? Where is the lie? Oh, it's too political. It's a fact, and it's not like a superfluous fact. It's directly relevant to the thing that they're reporting. It's not like they're saying President Trump, last known for reportedly having a small dick, announces his reelection. Like, it's not just tarring and feathering him or being salacious for no reason. It's reporting a fact about what he did the last time he was in power.
Yeah, and the like, I think the bigger issue is, I was seeing a lot of this, especially as like, it looked like Twitter was going to go down recently. It was this idea that ignoring these type of fights, ignoring the media fight, ignoring the fact that these echo chambers exist, and that the ability to put out a narrative and have it spread and be cohesive about it doesn't really exist on the left. Like, that's a thing that has failed. Like, I do not understand how there's not a single billionaire who couldn't just like make a Twitter clone.
Yeah.
And
do you remember when what was the New York the billionaire who ran in 2020? I mean, I'm blanking on his name. Huh? Bloomberg. Remember when he said, "Look, if I lose, I want Democrats to win so badly that if I lose, I'll basically bankroll everything, and yet I'll leverage all my." And we never heard from him again.
Good.
No, I mean, I'll take his money. I'll take his money to beat Republic. But I mean, he never followed through. It's like something switches off in an activist's brain once they get to a certain level of success or wealth. Because even like people talk about Elon Musk, there was a time when Elon Musk was, a lefty or more liberal at the very least. And then somewhere along the way, he lost his mind.
Well, yeah, because he tried to be funny, and also he's billionaire, and billionaires shouldn't exist, and therefore he's going to go with the party that sucks his dick and doesn't want to raise his taxes.
Do you remember his exact quote from that conference a couple of months ago, where he's like, "Listen, I know Republicans are the party of corporate evil and yada yada yada, but Democrats have a lot of unions
and lawyers,
yeah, trial lawyers and unions. So I guess I got to vote Republican." Really? That's your logic? I mean, he gave the game away right there, just owning the fact that his words, evil. But I'll vote for him. And also,
like, the Elon Musk thing is just wild, man. He's truly, like, there was that article that he has like 10 kids because he thinks he wants to be like Genghis Khan and just have just all of his all of humanity just to have a little bit of Elon in it.
That's terrifying. So bringing it back around to the messaging failures and double standards and stuff like that. Do you see, like, when you see like NPR headlines and stuff like that and little gestures towards that direction, do you think we will get to a point where mainstream media in particular, I don't think we can ever expect conservative media, but mainstream media, NPR, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, we'll get to a point where they will start abandoning centristy ideas and, okay, this side is actually clearly worse, and so we really need to like stop pretending this is a vortex of moral ambiguity. I would argue, and I know this might be controversial, but I mean it, and I think I could defend it well. In moral substance, what we see in the modern era between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is in its own way as stark as Axis v. Allies or Union versus Confederacy. I'm not going to sit here and say that the direct crimes are comparable, clearly not. But in terms of the stark contrast between two major political entities, I think they're comparable. I do. I think that you do have a clear villain of the American political story. It's not every Republican, because as a matter of fact, I think Republicans are very often victims of their own party. But Republican leaders, when I say Republicans, I mean the people in the Senate, people in Congress, the powers that be. I think they're the villains of the American political story. I don't think it's Lannisters v. Starks, to quote Game of Thrones. It's not. This isn't like a lot of moral ambiguity. It is a clear, stark contrast. Do you agree? Do you think that? And do you think, if you do agree, do you think that media will eventually start leaning into that more?
Only if they make it a big deal. Like, the reason that the media does Republican talking points is because they bitch and whine and moan about it. If you're not going to make it an issue, they're not going to cover it. They're going to cover what they think is going to drive them clicks. and or whatever they are, whatever billionaire owns them decides is relevant at that point. If you don't make it an issue, it's not going to be made an issue. If you don't repeat the talking point over and over again, it's not going to be covered. If you don't talk about the story, they're not going to cover it. Like, they're going, if it's not going to drive clicks, they're not going to care unless you make it an issue. You want to do something like, yeah, you. Speaking of which, like the shooting last night in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Lives TikTok as a terrorist. Their goal is to cause terrorism, just flat out. The Daily Wire, at least 2 of their hosts, his goal is to do the same thing. It's essentially all Matt Walsh does, is to try to harm LGBTQ people. That's literally his only goal. Got to call it out. Got to directly point it out. Got to call, like, if you're not pushing the narrative. Think about it. We talked about this earlier. They spent $12,000 per child to be bullied, each child.
Right. Well, there was a Republican candidate, and it went viral. I think she was like an ex-principal or ex-teacher, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, where she said it either during a debate or a rally.
Oh, she said you can't bully
Yes,
bully the trans kid anymore.
Right. What? Like, you're a monster. You really are. And the idea that, well, that was incendiary. Like, no. It was evil. It's evil. Like, we need to use very aggressive, moralistic language. We need to stop normalizing it. And this to me right here, this is a big one. So the Twitter user Kostjas, I think I'm pronouncing that right. You should follow her if you don't. She has been relentlessly reporting, collating articles and things like that, and finally put it on a WordPress blog. It wasn't like in a pivot table for the longest time. It's called, GOP sexual predators, Republican sexual predators, because it turns out that there's a strong correlation between conservative officials and Republicans and this sort of crime. These particularly egregious acts of indecency and sex crimes against women and children in particular. And yet, Democrats allow Republicans to set the narrative that Democrats are actually the party of, grooming and inappropriate relationships with minors. Really? Really? Why do we cough that up to them? Why do we it's clearly not true.
And also, it's like legitimately dangerous. Like, we need to be clear about this. The end result of the things that they are saying, the groomer argument, the coming for your kids, is getting people hurt. They arrested that group of Patriot Front guys outside of it. They continued to send bomb threats to the Boston Children's Hospital, directly due to Matt Walsh, the libs of TikTok, and to some extent Ben Shapiro for this story. They did it to another hospital. They show up outside of places where they're drag shows. They just shot up the bar. They shot up Pulse, and you know who the police didn't show up for over an hour in Pulse. You know who stopped the shooter in Colorado? The fucking people inside. They stopped an unarmed. They stopped an unarmed shooter. Which, again, I've been over this over and over. There's a really good article about a study in Texas over a 10-year span. The least way to stop an armed shooting is another person with a gun. You are more likely to stop a mass shooting with an unarmed person than a person with a firearm. More often than not, the reason a mass shooting stops is because the person runs out of fucking bullets. That's it. Like, this needs to be very clear what they're doing. And you don't even have to argue on the merits of trans healthcare or whatever the fuck. Arguing on the fact that there is a large part of their party that's goal is to bully children. There is at least 3 states that passed their anti-trans in sports, where there's one fucking trans kid. Imagine being that one fucking trans kid in it's Utah and like 2 other states. I know it's Utah, where specifically they wrote a bill that says, fuck you, you can't play sports because we think that you have an unfair advantage or whatever their reasoning is, or you're destroying women's. Like, man, could you imagine being that one kid? You imagine being that kid's friends? This is why the Gen Z kids showed up. And this is why they're going to keep showing up, because this is the type of shit that they're going to push. These are their fucking friends. You're going after they have gay friends. Listen, these kids, they're the gayest, queerest, most sexual awkward generation ever. Good for them. I don't give a shit. But that's who you're targeting. That's who they're going after.
Right.
And that needs to be very clear that these are their friends, and that's who they want who's going to get hurt by this.
Right. And that's what I mean. Like it's the fodder for very compelling moralistic narratives, which accurately depict the Republican Party as the corrupt and vicious institution that it is. It's there. But for some reason, we just don't have that killer instinct, politically speaking, to hit them with their own quotes, their own actions, whatever. And I feel like we got to get better about it. So it's another reason why I'm hoping, Fetterman's success will help bring that kind of energy, because he's an expert troll. And that's the other thing too. I understand that we on the left have to do our part to make the left attractive and cool and fun and whatnot. And I think Fetterman did that well. Fetterman was an expert troll, because honestly, that is Musk's appeal to so many people, is the fact that he owns the libs and trolls them. I mean, there's plenty to own on the right. And again, the tone policing involved, not just on the right against the left, because of course they do. They have an incentive to do it, right? They want to be able to bully us and don't want us to bully them. But very often our own side tone polices us with respect to aggressive rhetoric towards the right. And that's where, again, like, I really respect Vaush and people like Vaush and President Sunday and people like that, in terms of just like being, and obviously there's an instinct for it. And there are times where you press the accelerator, and then there are times that you ease up depending on the conversation. You have to be sensitive to conversational ebbs and flows. I get it. But I genuinely believe that there is a market for voters and for people who are attracted to the kind of energy that they think they get from Donald Trump and Ben Shapiro. I mean, these facts don't care about your feelings, gang. And we've got the facts on our side. We do. I mean, just again, on every level, Democrats are less likely to commit voter fraud. Republicans are more likely to commit, sex crimes against women and children. Republicans are worse for the economy. We have the facts on our side. Like you said, Republicans are pro-kids starving. They're not pro-life. They're pro-forced birth. They don't give a shit. I mean, as a political institution, the Republican Party, conservative Christians, as Matt Dillahunty pointed out, I'll give them credit. They're the demographic that is most likely to try to adopt, blah, blah, blah. But as a political party, Republicans do not support a strong social safety net. They don't care, generally speaking, about the welfare of kids after they leave the birth canal. So why do we even cough up the pro-life thing? They're not. They're pro-forced birth.
You know what happens to a gay couple that can't get married? They don't become straight. Like, if you're like, this is the new Ben Shapiro argument is, oh, our birth rates are too low, so we can't allow gays to marry. They're not going to become straight if you don't let them.
Did you see where Rogan just pimp smacked Walsh on the subject of marriage? Like, I mean, well,
I saw some of it. Like, look, Matt Walsh is the foremost expert on trans kids. Has no idea how many fucking trans kids there are in the country.
He was like million. Well, he's not even the number of trans kids. It was specifically how many kids do you think are on puberty blockers, which by definition would be a subset of trans kids.
He's a freak.
Yeah, he said millions. I think it's probably the millions at this point, thousands, maybe. And when it came to the subject of gay marriage, they're like, okay, well, why should only heterosexual marriage be allowed? Well, it's the primary means of procreation.
It's like,
okay, what about a couple that doesn't want to have kids?
Like, literally, if
yeah.
you think like 4 seconds past their original statement, everything they say turns to shit.
Yeah. Sabrina says, and yet Matt Gaetz is running around with a 17-year-old. Yes. So talk about somebody who's credibly accused of statutory rape or of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and he's still a sitting member of Congress, also going to be a de facto power player because he's a leader and a major voice of the Freedom Caucus. He's going to have McCarthy on a leash. In fact, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he has publicly declared he would not vote for McCarthy. So he's going to be a big power broker. He's still sitting on committees. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, why didn't Pelosi kick him off committees? She had the power to do that because she did it to Green. Did she just not think she could get the votes?
I mean, it was easier with Green and Gosar because Green is just objectively a terrible person, and Gosar, like what he did was pretty out there. Like,
yeah,
I think it's a little harder to convince people that like Gaetz needed to be thrown off of committees. Like he probably shouldn't. I don't remember if he was on the Judicial Committee. Like he probably shouldn't.
I can't remember what committees he's on. I do know he's on them though.
Right. Like you can make it's probably easier to make the argument that, hey, maybe somebody who's potentially under investigation shouldn't have oversight over the people who are investigating him.
Sure.
But that would be my guess.
Eucharist, which I don't know if you're familiar with Eucharist Fresh, but he's one of my favorite conservatives. He's not a Republican. He's more like are you familiar with Taftaj, the trans conservative streamer? Really good faith conservative.
Trans conservative streamer?
Yes. I'll send you the link to her profile. I know it's counterintuitive, but
I know Blair White exists, but
Taftaj is infinitely more thoughtful than Blair White, who is just like this vapid vacuum. I mean, like Taftaj is extremely well read in philosophy and politics. Eucharist, he is a politics geek and politics wonk as well, kind of like how we are, and has a really strong philosophy background, very critical of the Republican Party. And I would say more I don't want to misrepresent him, more center right than anything. I would recommend that if you ever want to have like conversations with a good faith conservative, he'd be the one to do. I had a really good panel with him and Taftaj on the subject of whether the GOP is fascist, and not so erudite moderated it. He's a really good guy. I would recommend that you two check each other out. But anyway, so the last clip I want to discuss here is that was one investigation, the congressional investigation that will be the Oversight Committee, and I expect the Judicial Committee will be involved at least oversight into Hunter Biden, and then of course the last one that was announced the next day. Bring it up here.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to announce the appointment of a special counsel in connection with two ongoing criminal investigations that have received significant public attention. The first, as described in court filings in the District of Columbia, is the investigation into whether any person or entity unlawfully interfered with the transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election or the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6, 2021. The second is the ongoing investigation involving classified documents and other presidential records, as well as the possible obstruction of that investigation, referenced and described in court filings in a pending matter in the Southern District of Florida. I'm joined today by Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia Matthew Graves, and Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Kenneth Polite. Assistant Attorney General for National Security, Matthew Olson, could not be here. He is currently in Germany, representing the department at the G7 Home Affairs and Security Ministerial. U.S. Attorney Graves has been ably leading the investigations into the events leading up to and on January 6. He and dozens of assistant U.S. attorneys and other prosecutors have taken on the monumental task of conducting over 900 prosecutions in defense of our democratic institutions. Criminal Division prosecutors, under the able leadership of Assistant Attorney General Polite, have played a significant role in those prosecutions. Assistant Attorney General Olson has been ably leading the team responsible for investigating the matter, involving classified documents and other presidential records, as well as the possible obstruction of that investigation. All of the career prosecutors assigned to these matters are conducting their work in the best traditions of the Department of Justice. I also want to recognize the efforts of the many FBI agents and other law enforcement personnel who are assigned to these matters. They are working courageously and steadfastly and are serving our nation honorably. I am grateful to them. We all are. The Department of Justice has long recognized that in certain extraordinary cases, it is in the public interest to appoint a special prosecutor to independently manage an investigation and prosecution. Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel. Such an appointment underscores the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive matters. It also allows prosecutors and agents to continue their work expeditiously and to make decisions indisputably guided only by the facts and the law. The special counsel will conduct parts of the first investigation I just mentioned. The investigation into whether any person or entity unlawfully interfered with the transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election, or with the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6. This does not include prosecutions that are currently pending in the District of Columbia, or future investigations and prosecutions of individuals for offenses committed while they were physically present on the Capitol grounds on January 6. Those investigations and prosecutions will remain under the authority of the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. The special counsel will also conduct the investigation involving classified documents and other presidential records, as well as the possible obstruction of that investigation. Today, I signed an order appointing Jack Smith to serve as special counsel. The order authorizes him to continue the ongoing investigation into both of the matters that I have just described and to prosecute any federal crimes that may arise from those investigations. Mr. Smith is a veteran career prosecutor. He began his prosecutorial career in 1994 as an assistant district attorney with the New York County DA's office. In 1999, he became an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York, where over the course of 9 years, he prosecuted matters ranging from gang murders of police officers to civil rights violations. From 2008 to 2010, he served with the International Criminal Court, where he supervised war crimes investigations. In 2010, Mr. Smith returned to the Justice Department to serve as chief of the Public Integrity Section, where he led a team of more than 30 prosecutors who handled public corruption and election crimes cases across the United States. In 2015, he agreed to serve as the first assistant U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Tennessee, later becoming the acting United States attorney. Most recently, Mr. Smith served as a chief prosecutor for the special court in The Hague, charged with investigating and adjudicating war crimes in Kosovo. Mr. Smith will begin his work as special counsel immediately and will be returning to the United States from The Hague. Throughout his career, Jack Smith has built a reputation as an impartial and determined prosecutor who leads teams with energy and focus to follow the facts wherever they lead. As special counsel, he will exercise independent prosecutorial judgment to decide whether charges should be brought. Although the special counsel will not be subject to the day-to-day supervision of any official of the department, he must comply with the regulations, procedures, and policies of the department. I will ensure that the special counsel receives the resources to conduct this work quickly and completely. Given the work to date and Mr. Smith's prosecutorial experience, I am confident that this appointment will not slow the completion of these investigations. The men and women who are pursuing these investigations are conducting themselves in accordance with the highest standards of professionalism. I could not be prouder of them. I strongly believe that the normal processes of this department can handle all investigations with integrity. And I also believe that appointing a special counsel at this time is the right thing to do. The extraordinary circumstances presented here demand it. Mr. Smith is the right choice to complete these matters in an even-handed and urgent manner. Thank you all.
So, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this move by Attorney General Garland?
Fuck it. I don't care. Charge somebody. Fucking charge somebody. Like, I don't care how it gets done. Just look. There appears to be evidence, at least in the documents case, that he's generally guilty. January 6th, you can see evidence of him being guilty. I don't know how they're gonna, ultimately figure it out. Whatever it is, charge somebody. I wish if you thought about this being like you knew he was going to announce. Like you shouldn't announce the special counsel investigation earlier. Just like that would have been way easier. Just it would be nice to, have somebody pay. Like, I don't know if this is also going to go with, like I mentioned, the other people who are involved in this, the other like Congress people who probably deserve to face charges, but like, just fucking charge somebody. Like, you have to. Like, we cannot allow this to go unpunished. And not in the sense that like, oh, I'm scared and running. No, the motherfucker tried to overturn democracy and then stole a whole bunch of shit that wasn't his.
Yeah, I keep going back to the double standard. And this is actually a really good example. So let me first say this. I had my doubts about Garland for a while. And then I did some research into him and found out that he prosecuted the Unabomber. He prosecuted the 1996 Atlanta Olympics bombing. This man, I joke, he's like as crass as it sounds, he's like a fart. He's silent but deadly, in the sense that he's conservative in the classical sense, not the political sense, but in the like quiet, reserved, not ostentatious, takes his time, but he's relentless. And I do think that he thinks Trump is guilty. And I think that it says something that he's appointed a special prosecutor, because I do feel that many other attorneys general in this position would not would have truly hesitated and perhaps not investigated at all. Robert Mueller is a great example where, he found compelling evidence that Trump tried to obstruct justice, that there were inappropriate contacts between Trump campaign and administration officials and Russian assets, but he punted on whether or not to recommend charges against the president. And I understand a degree of hesitation there. I don't think people should be cavalier about pressing charges against the most powerful man in the world, although Trump is not anymore. He's just a former president. I get it. But I do think that Garland has been signaling that he's serious about it. That said, I do agree with you. We knew he was going to run, or we knew it was very probable, if only to insulate himself and try to run the clock out on charges, right? So if you weren't prepared for the possibility of indicting him, like if you knew that, okay, if this man ever announces that he's running, that it would be a conflict of interest for me, because technically the president is my boss, the president's Joe Biden, and that is a political rival of Donald Trump. So I need to appoint a special prosecutor. You should have done this a year ago, or 6 months ago, whatever. Now, at the same time, I don't think that Jack Smith will be starting from scratch. There have been reports all throughout the January 6 hearings that the Department of Justice has been paying very close attention to the findings and evidence and depositions and all a lot of the legwork, I feel like, was done by the House Select January 6th committee. And even Garland himself was saying that the Department of Justice is watching this. So I don't think it's going to restart the clock.
No,
it'd be so stupid if it did. I doubt it will. And from what I've read, Jack White is a hell of a choice. Not Jack White, Jack Smith.
He really is like the most NPC name you could think of.
Yes. Yeah, he really is. Like it's an alias. From what I've read, this man is like, he's also the real deal. The fact that he's working for The Hague, convicting people or charging people of war crimes in Kosovo, which happened in the late 90s. I mean, this guy is clearly not, and the fact that he's relatively young, he's not retired. I don't think that Garland is drafting him. I believe, based on reports, based on, the subtle communicative things that Garland has said in select interviews over the past few months, I think Garland is prepared to indict Trump. He's just trying to do this in the most politically thoughtful way possible to try to dissuade people from thinking this is political. But the problem is, the people who are going to think it's political are going to think it's political. You know what I mean?
You're not going to appease them. They're going to say it's political.
Yeah. The idea of just bringing charges to even looking at Trump giving him a second glance is political to a huge chunk of the Republican Party. So you aren't gonna persuade them anyway. So I don't know. I'm not discouraged by any stretch. I'm with you. I want action. We need action. We need action because I do not think, I think that if you let this go, if you fumble the ball here, I feel like you've cut the life expectancy of this republic in half because all that's going to do is signal to Trump or somebody like DeSantis, who I
Or
think
Tucker.
like fascistic urges, but he's trying to be cagier and cunning about it. You will signal to the next generation of conservative Republican leader that they can stage a coup. You don't want
Yeah, you have to.
that has a limiting principle. I don't believe that. I do not believe it. I do not believe this idea that, well, you just let it go. Just let it go. Let it go. The Susan Collins shit. He learned his lesson. He learned his lesson. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for the leaders of the Republican Party, period. I don't believe it.
Yeah, and also, like, it is worth mentioning that all of the people who, like, 2 weeks ago were saying, oh, I'm dumping Trump, will all pretend they never said that.
Let's
Yeah,
see.
no, obviously, yes. Irish is right. The Secretary of State victories do make a coup much harder, but it doesn't make it impossible.
No, and like Fresh said earlier, you only got to do it once. You got to pull. You only have to pull it off once, and you don't have to pull it off in all 50 states. Because here's the other
You
thing:
just need a supermajority. That's all Orban needed to fuck Hungary, was a one supermajority. They already have the courts. They don't need that to change that much.
And even if the coup isn't successful, I mean, even an attempt, it's like, to me, it's like the same thing as attempted murder. No one in their right mind would say, well, it's only attempted murder. He didn't successfully kill me. So what? The intent was still there. The mens rea was still there. He just failed because he's incompetent. You know, I mean, and that's what I was getting to with the double standard. So you look at all, like, you talk about the January 6th thing. I agree, just because it's a more ambitious case. I guess by definition, it would be harder to make, right? There are more moving parts involved. But I think the January 6th committee made a hell of a persuasive case that Trump is morally, ethically, and legally culpable for what happened. And to me, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but if only for the fact that he sat on his fat orange ass for 4 hours and watched it happen. Again, I go back to, I'm just imagining. We don't even have to go back to 2013. We can go back to 2016 again. And if Hillary had done what Trump did in 2021, if she did that as the losing candidate in 2016, if she did that in 2017, and Obama, the Democratic president, just sat and watched it happen, can you imagine what would have happened on Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, and the Republican Party? They demand his resignation and imprisonment for life.
Yeah, I mean, that exactly, of course. But also, you're missing the other point where the Judiciary Committee tweeted out that this was boring and that they didn't learn anything new.
Right.
So therefore, your argument is bunk. And
that's true. You know
Trump
what? You're right.
And wait,
right.
I don't know if you've seen this, because Elon Musk let Trump's Twitter back on Twitter. And I've seen a lot of people tweet some things that he said at the beginning of the riot. Well, he still did nothing, and therefore he didn't do anything bad.
Right. Well, speaking of the Trump thing, did you see where Trump said that he wouldn't go back to Twitter?
Well, first off, he has to figure out how to do it with Truth Social, because he's a lot his money tied into it. So
right. No, I know it would kill Truth, or as he calls it, Troth Central. And Devin Nunes is probably like shitting his pants right now, worried that Trump, because you have two things at play here: Trump's financial investment in Truth Social and the ego about, it's like going back to your ex who lets you come back. But at the same time, Twitter is just a bigger name and Trump is a narcissist. And so he has to balance these like two mutually exclusive interests. Do I go back to Twitter? It's the bigger audience. I can yell more. People see me more, pay more attention to me. I have a mass cult there that desperately wants me back. But I'll also kind of look like a loser going back to somebody who rejected me. Or on the other hand, do I stick with Truth Social, given the financial stake? It's interesting, but so far he said he wouldn't go back because Elon's, tanking Twitter and all this.
Which he
I
is.
love that.
Which, like, Elon is tanking Twitter, and it's really fun that it's now $8 chat, because it's like, it's incredible that he's both allowing all the Nazis back on and simultaneously burning down the platform in record time.
Well, real quick, Rich says, I think his agreement says that he has to wait at least 6 hours after posting a truth before he can repeat it on other platforms. Is that real?
I think that's what I've seen as well.
Wow.
And, which, when he's having his normal ones where he fires off like 60 tweets an hour, 6 hours later, those things don't matter anymore.
No, I know.
I mean, mad at whatever he's watching on Fox and Friends or OAN or whatever fucking thing he woke up in a cold sweat over.
Dude has a goldfish memory. I'll say this too about, and it goes back to trolling as well. When Musk made that poll about bringing Trump back, I voted no. But part of me was like, oh, did I just feed the troll? Because I feel like part of me feels like he was going to do this anyway, no matter what the poll. I mean, my God, didn't he also put up a poll about like donating X amount of dollars to climate change reform or whatnot, or green energy, and then he never followed up with it? And so then when AOC she gave a very serious tweet, was like, look, the last time this guy was on Twitter, he, said all these things, blah, 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 tried to stage a coup effectively. Part of me felt like the fact that you said that to Elon Musk, AOC, like even though it's factually true, I feel like that was another thing that was going to motivate him to put him back on Twitter anyway, because AOC, it'd piss AOC off. You know what I mean? So it makes me wonder if maybe the very best thing we can do with Elon Musk, as hard as it is for nobody to talk about him, period, no matter what he does.
It's only an issue because look, he's right. Trump on Twitter is the best case scenario for the Democrats because, again, like the party being controlled by the craziest people, they're going to follow whatever he says, or at least they're going to push for the things that he says, because he is the presumptive nominee for the party. He's going to,
and he's still the leader of the party. He is still he's still the leader of the party.
And every time he tweets something crazy, they're going to have to answer for it, or it's going to make them look crazy. Because look, they repudiated them. They said, we don't want this level of crazy. And the people in New York, especially the New York ones that just won, are probably not going to win again in 24. Like, they don't want any of this. Like, good. Like, look, the problem really with Twitter is there's no alternative. Apparently, Mastodon, it's not Mastodon, although I am hearing some stuff about Post News as a potential.
I tried to set up my Mastodon. I have no idea what the hell this is. Like, everything's its own server, and it's just, I'm like, I need something like basic.
Yeah. Show
me where I can post a video or
George Soros, where is my money? So I'll set up the Twitter clone.
He just the conspiracy hasn't activated yet. Whatever.
Oh, we talk about, like, very quickly? This isn't relevant to anything.
Sure. If
Josh Shapiro ever runs for president, we're going to see a whole level of anti-Semitism that's just going to be like,
oh my God, yeah. Well, no, 100%.
And I kind of want it to happen because I just want to take the mask off. I want to see Ben Shapiro stroke out trying to defend them, just calling him a kike.
Dude, I mean, there again, Ben Shapiro bends over backwards to accommodate anti-Semitism when it comes from Ann Coulter, Candace Owens, Ye, whatever. Ilhan Omar criticizes the Israeli government, and she's basically committed a war crime. It's again, that's how my brain works. I go back to the double standard by everybody, and it's madness. Well, no, look, I think we basically covered it all. I wanted to do the nuanced bro destiny thing, but we had so many good conversations about actual policy, so that'll have to be later on in the week. But hey, I'm glad we did this. The the internet's been reliable for you for like the past like hour and a half. So hopefully that's a sign of good things to come. I don't know what my streaming schedule is going to look like. This is kind of like my first scheduled stream in, again, damn near a year, at least 8 or 9 months. And it was fun. And I want to keep it policy based like this, but I'm also thinking about, it's also nice to play off people and whatnot. So I'm also thinking about trying to make this a semi-regular panel thing. My buddy Stacks that I tried to get on, but I guess he was working or whatnot. I think you're in his Discord server. He's a good one to talk to. I don't want to have just like performative conversation. I'd love to have, conversations with good faith conservatives, people like Eucharist and Taftaj and whatnot, but not to just play I don't want to play the devil's advocate for somebody or vice versa, just to, get clicks. So hopefully along the way, there will be opportunities to pick the brains of good faith, thoughtful conservatives about what's going on in American politics. But yeah, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to do this in a while. As long as you give me enough heads up, I can usually figure it out with my schedule.
Before I let you go, and I'll let you have the last word on this. Everybody follow Fresh on Twitter. I put the link here, and then Twitch, and he will eventually be back into streaming. But anything else you want to add?
No, man, I'm excited. We're gonna see some wacky stuff coming up, and it's gonna be fun. I enjoyed talking to all you in chat. I do hope to be back streaming soon. Twitter right now is the best place to follow me until Twitter implodes and I figure out. I finally put Instagram on my phone. I just like adamantly refuse to use Instagram. And then
TikTok, you definitely need to do TikTok. Instagram,
I just haven't like gotten around to using it because
you got to. That's where I found the most traction. I'm still like I plateaued at like a little over 20,000. Stacks pulled ahead, and he's like getting close to 30,000. But it's the most low effort, the highest engagement. I think everybody you stand a good chance there of getting engagement. I'm just more interested in longer form discussions, not necessarily 3-hour conversations like this, but like small video essays and small pieces. I've been in Destiny streams quite a bit here lately, pushing him, trying to do my part to push him away from orbiter drama stuff and back towards politics. He had some great rants against some right wingers on a panel during and after midterms, which is good. But I'm trying to increase my footprint here. Luke Beasley is where Sabrina came from. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I do want to say anyone in chat that like when I do stream, if you want to debate stuff, I'm always open to debating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good faith.
I love having conversations.
Good faith. Yeah. Conservative debates. We're always
even left debates.
Sure. People who just,
as a leftist critique, because I talked to somebody who was an anarchist, and granted, I'd just come off of work, and it was like a Friday at 8 o'clock when we started talking, and he had read so many more books on stuff than I had that I was like, I'm so out of my depth in this conversation that I'm just like, hey, this was fun.
Yeah. No, any sort of, my thing is what I won't do. And I've told people this, and I think it's going to set me back a long way. It's going to be one of the many things working against me is I won't do performative disagreements. It's part of the reason why I've not been able to get on Vosh's stream, and because Vosh was very candid, he's like, we don't really disagree on anything, so what's the point? I'm like, that's true.
Yeah, I don't want. Yeah, I'm not circle jerking either.
Yeah, I don't. I guess you could argue this was a bit of a circle jerk because we largely agree on things, but it was also like we weren't just sitting around chatting. Like we were talking about very specific news items.
It's a policy also based. We were discussing policy issues and going into actual coverage of things. It wasn't like, Trump
what do you
is bad
think?
Because Orange Man bad.
Right. Although we did have some moments of that where we were able to put that in there as it should be. But yeah, like IRI is another policy wonk. I'm sure you're familiar with him. I'm really important. Yeah. But yeah, like I love. I don't know. I feel like very few commentators are as policy knowledgeable, not to toot our own horns, as we are. Luke Beasley is another good one.
That's because the drama drives engagement.
Yeah, I just can't. Like I definitely understand, trying to make it entertaining and infotainment. I get it. I 100, and I'm not saying that I've cracked the code by any stretch. And you want to have like people you can play off of and banter and whatnot. It'd be great to if you could have a good dialogue with, again, people you have legitimate disagreements with, either on the left or who are more centrist of you or conservatives, but trying to like prune, like cultivate who those people are and getting in touch with them, it's hard. But I'm hoping we can crack the code. And I do think if it were more collaborative, and it's not just, you know, like me just talking into a camera or whatever, I think that would be a good way to do it, and having like an active chat to ask questions or whatever. But yeah, appreciate you doing this, man. I really do. Thanks for the last 3 hours.
Yeah, man, it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
All right. Have a good one, man.
You too. Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody. Well, that was fun. We were not able to discuss everything I wanted to talk about. I wanted to review that debate con with Destiny and Nuance, bro. That'll have to wait. Sabrina, Rich, Eucharist. I thought it was Blue Ribbon. Maybe I'm just thinking of beer. PBR. Let's see. Blue collar POV. And I think he's got a PBR icon. Thank you all for participating. This will be up on my YouTube channel as a recording. I'll probably splice out certain segments, and we'll see where we can go from here in the future. But this was a good test run of the Restream functions. Hope it went well. Thanks for participating. It's Ruminate out.